Chapter 255. Qin Yiru smiled when she heard that Qin Fangfang was coming back. Qin Fangfang was the only one in Qin Yiru's generation who managed to get into university. Even among her peers, Qin Fangfang's grades were the best. Not to mention now, in Qin Yiru's generation, the number of people who managed to get into university could be counted with one's fingers. Therefore, in the past, the villagers all had the feeling that whoever's child could get into university was a talent. Qin Fangfang was undoubtedly a talent. She got into a famous university in another province and settled down there after graduation. In the end, she even met a rich boyfriend and got married in another province. She rarely came back. Qin Fangfang, on the other hand, was the closest to Qin Yiru among the Qins. The two sisters were so close that they could talk about anything. However, Qin Fangfang went to university, worked and got married, so she did not have time to come back. Therefore, their relationship faded as time passed. When Zhang Meihua heard that her youngest daughter was going back home to visit her parents, she was all smiles. Her youngest daughter had always been her pride. She was good at her studies when she was young. Not only did she get into a famous university, she even married a rich man. Oh my, it was said that he was worth millions. His family could even afford to drive a car. In this era, those who could afford to drive a car were definitely from a rich family. Honk honk honk. Not long after, the sound of a car horn came from outside the door. Zhang Meihua heard it and ran out immediately. Qin Yiru pulled Yun Jian and followed Zhang Meihua and the rest out. At this moment they saw a black Santana outside the door, honking as it drove over. Hearing the honking along the way, some of the neighbors who were at home for a blind date ran out and looked at it with envy. Someone even pointed at the Santana and shouted, "Look, it's a car." Rich people. In this era, it was rare to see a car in a small town like Xinjiang town. Even if there was a car, it would only be driven back by the rich who went out to work. In the entire town, there were probably only one or two families who could afford to drive a car. Therefore, when Zhang Meihua heard the neighbors' praises, her face was full of smiles and pride. That was her son-in-law's car. The sedan was also honking loudly as it drove all the way to the door. The passenger door of the car opened, and a fashionably dressed woman got out of the Santana. "Mom, sis, you're all here." The woman saw Zhang Meihua and Qin Yiru and shouted in surprise. This fashionably dressed woman was undoubtedly Qin Fangfang, Qin Yiru's sister and Yun Jian's aunt. She looked happy just a moment to come back. She frowned, her face who was just radiant just now, instantly her face who was just now, she was to, who was just a moment ago she was, she who was just a moment ago she. Her to is to look, she was to her to be too's. No, it's the same as the last time I saw you. Qin Yiru chuckled awkwardly, trying to ease the tension. You have to take good care of yourself. Qin Fangfang consoled Qin Yiru. She then noticed Yun Jian who was standing beside Qin Yiru. She took a few glances at Yun Jian and exclaimed in surprise, "Ah, is this Xiao Jian? You've grown so big." "Xiao Jian, this is your aunt. Quick, greet her." Qin Yiru nudged Yun Jian with a smile. Yun Jian had a good impression of Qin Fangfang when she saw how well she treated Qin Yiru. "Auntie," Yun Jian called out. "Oh, good girl." Qin Fangfang beamed. "Oh my, what is this lousy place? So shabby. Fangfang, come over quick." A wealthy woman in her 50s or 60s alighted from the Santana. She was dressed in branded fur and her tone was indescribably smug. This person was Qin Fangfang's mother-in-law, Zhu Hengxiang. Chapter 256. Zhu Hengxiang was in her 50s or 60s, but her skin was smooth and well-maintained, making her look like she was in her 30s or 40s. She did not look old at all. Judging from her appearance, Zhu Hengxiang also had a radiant face. She was also quite good-looking. It could be seen that when she was young, she must have been a great beauty. However, the words that came out of her mouth were not as pleasant. Qin Fangfang smiled awkwardly and ran back to help her mother-in-law. It was Zhu Hengxiang's first time in Xinjiang town. She had refused to come in the past but insisted on tagging along today. In addition, Zhu Hengxiang's overbearing manner was disagreeable. "Oh, my in-law, you're here. Xiaowen is here too. Welcome, welcome." Zhang Meihua put on her signature smile and went up to her. Zhang Meihua had met Zhu Hengxiang before. She was the one who had gone out of the province to discuss Qin Fangfang and Sun Baiwen's wedding. "I can't afford to be in-law." Zhu Hengxiang did not give Zhang Meihua any face. After she finished speaking, she muttered a few more words. "Oh my, this place is so shabby. It's so shabby and small. I really don't know how to live here." Zhu Hengxiang grew up in a wealthy family and was a typical landowner's daughter. She had been living in the upper-middle-class society and had always looked down on those who lived at the bottom of society. Zhu Hengxiang quite liked Qin Fangfang as her daughter-in-law, but she had intervened when she heard about Qin Fangfang's family background. Her son, Sun Baiwen, had his heart set on Qin Fangfang and even said that he would marry no one else but her in this life. Zhu Hengxiang was afraid that her son would really not marry and the Sun family would have no descendants in the future, so she agreed to it reluctantly. Zhang Meihua and the rest heard Zhu Hengxiang's grumbling and smiled awkwardly. Sun Baiwen smiled as well. Sun Baiwen was different from Zhu Hengxiang. Although Zhu Hengxiang gave birth to Sun Baiwen, he looked gentle and polite. He was also a nice person and would not point out other people's shortcomings. Mother-in-law, we're here in Longmen City for something, so we thought we'd drop by to visit you. Fangfang picked out quite a number of gifts and they're in the trunk. Let Brother Qian help me get them, said Sun Baiwen. All right. Here's the money, go and get it from little one. Go. Zhang Meihua couldn't stop smiling this time. She even patted Qin Liqian and urged him. Qin Yiru, who had been ignored, smiled awkwardly. Yun Jian, on the other hand, narrowed her eyes and remained silent. With Qin Yiru's help, a sumptuous dinner was quickly prepared. However, Zhu Hengxiang still said with disdain, "Is that all?" These words made Zhang Meihua feel awkward again. After all, this table of good wine and meat was something that they usually couldn't bear to eat. Right, Xiaowen, is there anything you need this time in Longmen City? Zhang Meihua asked as she filled Sun Baiwen's third bowl of rice. After all, Qin Fangfang's family seldom came back, and Zhu Hengxiang was never willing to come here. Therefore, Zhang Meihua felt very strange. Yes, there is. Sun Baiwen smiled and scratched his head, continuing, didn't we hear that Longmen City is going to hold an auto show soon? I heard that it's the biggest one in the country. It's going to be an exhibition of hundreds and thousands of luxury cars. We probably won't see it even once in a few decades. Our family sells cars as well, so we followed the trend and came to take a look. Zhang Meihua knew that Sun Baiwen's family made a fortune selling cars as well. Are you serious? There's an auto show of this scale in Longmen City? How much money does it cost to hold a party like this? Qin Liqian shouted excitedly when he heard that. Longmen City Auto Show. Yun Jian's eyelid twitched when she heard the name. It seemed that Zhang Zhifan had done his job of promoting it. Even people outside the province had heard about it. Chapter 257. In reality, Zhang Zhifan had already reorganized the entire storefront. At the same time, he had reserved a huge space for the car exhibition. The car exhibition was set to be held 5 days later. As for the other related personnel and all the arrangements, Zhang Zhifan had already made the necessary arrangements. Yun Jian was also relieved to hand new crews over to Zhang Zhifan to manage. Obviously, Zhang Zhifan did not disappoint. Of course it's true. There's a lot of publicity for the car exhibition this time. There will be hundreds to thousands of luxury cars. As long as you name a car, it'll be an eye-opener at the car exhibition. Sun Baiwen shouted excitedly. Zhang Meihua and the rest booed the moment Sun Baiwen said that. Zhu Hengxiang snickered when she saw that her son's words had caused an uproar among the crowd. Ha, what a bunch of ignorant people. The dinner was filled with men talking about men's affairs. The women chatted about women's daily life. Qin Yiru and Qin Fangfang had not seen each other for a long time. The two sisters were having a great time talking. Yun Jian, on the other hand, was stuffing her mouth with fish and meat without saying a word. Sigh. At this moment, Sun Baiwen sighed and said, it's a pity that the auto show this time requires an invitation. Not everyone can enter. Qin Fangfang felt sad when she heard Sun Baiwen's disappointed gaze. Don't be discouraged. There are still 5 days until the car exhibition. Let's go find out how to get the invitation. If there's really no other way, we can just take a look outside the car exhibition. Let's give it a try. Qin Fangfang turned to look at her husband, Sun Baiwen, and stopped talking to Qin Yiru. Sun Baiwen looked at his wife Qin Fangfang's comforting voice and instantly warmed up. Is this the invitation to the car exhibition? Qin Yiru thought about it for a few seconds. She suddenly grabbed her bag and took out about 10 cards with a high-end sports car printed on the front and New Cruise Auto Show invitation written on the back. Sun Baiwen unconsciously glanced at the cards in Qin Yiru's hand, and he stood up in surprise. A sense of astonishment filled his heart. Right. This is the invitation letter for New Cruise's auto show. But why do you have it? And you have at least a dozen invitations in your hands? New Cruise only sent out 1,000 invitations to the outside world, and those who were invited were all leaders of the business world, Long Xiao. Even we didn't have the right to be invited. Sun Baiwen stared at the invitations that Qin Yiru had taken out in shock, stupefied. The auto exhibition organized by New Cruise this time only invited the rich or powerful bosses. Even those big bosses only had one invitation letter in their hands at most. There were already people in the market who were buying the invitation cards at high prices just to witness the splendor of the country's largest auto show. One invitation card could be sold at a sky-high price. However, the problem was that many big bosses refused to sell the invitation cards because they wanted to witness the show's splendor. Under such circumstances, it was shocking that Qin Yiru could take out more than 10 invitations at once. Everyone looked at Qin Yiru in shock. I was given these by the manager of New Cruise when I was working there. He said that I could ask my relatives and friends to take a look. I don't know what these are and I didn't plan to attend such an event. I was planning to throw them away in a few days. Qin Yiru was stunned as well. She did not expect the invitation cards in her hand to be so important. You work at New Cruise? Sun Baiwen asked in shock as if he had discovered a new continent. Yes, I'm just a cleaning lady. Qin Yiru was at a loss. Cleaning lady, you got more than 10 invitations? Sun Baiwen almost fainted from the shock. He had thought of many ways to get an invitation card before he came, but he could not do anything in the end. Chapter 258. Qin Yiru did not understand the question, but she nodded blankly. Yun Jian, who was sitting next to Qin Yiru, paused as she held a small cup of water. A faint smile spread across her lips. She took a sip of water and gulped it down. Qin Yiru's invitation was naturally given to her by the manager of New Cruise. At the same time, Yun Jian had also instructed Zhang Jifan to hire more cleaning ladies so that Qin Yiru's area would be divided into the smallest area. Now, Qin Yiru's daily work was more relaxed than those graduates from prestigious universities who came out to work in the office. Moreover, a monthly salary of 1,500 yuan was not considered low in 1998. That was why Qin Yiru was able to save money after deducting her monthly expenses. Why don't you guys take these invitations? I don't need them anyway. I won't attend that kind of event. Qin Yiru generously placed the invitations on the table and pushed them to Sun Baiwen. When Sun Baiwen's mother, Zhu Hengxiang, saw this, she quickly reached out to take them. However, Sun Baiwen reached out to stop her. We only need one. One invitation will allow our whole family to go in and watch the car show. Sun Baiwen only took one of the invitations and returned the rest to Qin Yiru in a friendly manner. He even thanked Qin Yiru politely. Thank you, sister. One invitation would allow their whole family to go in and watch the car show. As long as one person had one invitation, they could bring their family and friends to visit. There was no limit to the number of people they could bring. This was also an idea that Yun Jian came up with. The cars she sold were targeted at the big bosses. Even if ordinary people went, they would not be able to afford them. This was not to say that Yun Jian looked down on the poor, but it was a business concept. Of course, if the big bosses brought their family and friends to visit, it would be very different. Usually, the family and friends of the big bosses would not be too poor. Especially the friends of the big bosses, they would only become friends because they were in the same circle. Therefore, most of them had families that could afford cars. Therefore, if these people went, they would most likely spend money to buy cars in the future. After dinner, the sky was completely dark. However, Xinjiang town had street lights at night, so there was no need to worry about the dark. Qin Fangfang dragged Qin Yiru out for a walk. At night, Qin Fangfang requested to sleep with Qin Yiru. The two sisters had a lot of things to talk about since they were rarely together. Fortunately, there were plenty of rooms in Zhang Meihua's house, so she arranged one for Yun Jian. Although Sun Baiwen couldn't hug his wife to sleep for the whole night, he could understand Qin Fangfang very well, so he agreed. The next morning, Yun Jian returned to her first home since her rebirth with Qin Yiru. At the door, she also saw Yun Gang, her irresponsible father, whom she had met not long ago in the casino. Qin Yiru wanted to divorce Yun Gang, but Yun Gang refused. In the end, it was Yun Jian's grandfather, Yun Zhong, who felt that his son had ruined the family and forced him to sign the divorce agreement. It was only then that the matter was settled. The matter was finally settled. When the Civil Affairs Bureau was done with the last step, Qin Yiru took a few deep breaths. The weather today was similar to when she and Yun Gang registered their marriage. The sun was high up in the sky. Under the sunlight, there was a hint of warmth amidst the cold. To be honest, she had lived with Yun Gang for so many years. It would be a lie to say that she had no feelings for him. However, as time went by, Yun Gang committed more and more mistakes. Her patience had been worn out. Yun Jian held Qin Yiru's hand. Holding her mother's rough hand, Qin Yiru made their way to the bus stop back to Longmen City. She swore that she would never let Qin Yiru suffer in the future. Chapter 259. After returning to Longmen City, Yun Jian had a few more carefree days. Soon it was the day of the auto show. In the morning, Yun Jian was already awake when the sun was still rising. She had asked Zhang Xiaofeng and Qin Sini to watch the auto show together. Ling Yichen was also tagging along. Both Zhang Xiaofeng and Ling Yichen were boys, so it was only natural that they were fond of racing and machinery. Once they heard that Yun Jian asked if they were interested in watching the auto show, they agreed without hesitation. When they found out that the auto show this time was the largest auto show in the country organized by new crews which had been in the limelight recently, Zhang Xiaofeng and Ling Yichen were dumbfounded. "Master, do you have an invitation for this place?" Standing at the entrance of the auto show, Zhang Xiaofeng glanced at Yun Jian and asked with a twitch of his lips as he watched the guards checking the invitations. "No." Yun Jian smiled breezily and led the way. No. No. How did we get in if we didn't? Hey master, wait for us." Zhang Xiaofeng did not react for a moment before he caught up to Yun Jian's light steps with Qin Sini, who had been giggling with a hand over her mouth, and Ling Yichen, who was glaring at him. When they reached the entrance where the invitations were checked, Yun Jian and the rest were stopped. The guard did not recognize Yun Jian and assumed that Yun Jian and the rest were naughty kids and stopped them on the spot. His tone was not pleasant either. "This is an auto show, not a place for kids to play. Little girls and little boys, did you come to the wrong place?" The guard thought that he was the one who was checking the invitations for the auto show, so he was feeling smug. He spoke to Yun Jian and the rest in a dignified and confident manner. Yun Jian did not have an invitation because she did not bring it with her and there was no need for it. Ignoring the gatekeeper, Yun Jian typed a message on her phone and sent it out. Not long after, a strong man rushed out of the door. The person in charge was one of Zhang Jifan's brothers. He had followed Zhang Jifan out of Xinjiang town. The person's surname was Wu. Steward Wu was in charge of maintaining order in the venue. Receiving Zhang Jifan's instruction that Sister Jian was here, he put down what he was doing and rushed out. Walking to Yun Jian, Steward Wu bent down to look at Yun Jian with a smile, addressing her respectfully in front of everyone. "Sister Jian, you're here. Why didn't you come in directly? We've been waiting for you for a long time." When the gatekeeper saw that his superior had come, he was going to complain to Yun Jian and the other kids for not leaving. Unexpectedly, Steward Wu went to Yun Jian and addressed her as Sister Jian. "Sister? Could it be that the girl he stopped had a higher status than Steward Wu? I was stopped, so I had to ask you to come out." Yun Jian gave a half-smile, her emotions unreadable. After that, she led the three of them into the auto show's entrance, who were still in shock with their mouths agape. Steward Wu stood rooted to the spot before he turned to scold the gatekeeper who stopped Yun Jian and the rest. "Xiao Wang, you've *King caused trouble for me. If Sister Jian blames you, you'll have to bear the consequences." It was obvious that Steward Wu knew the gatekeeper named Xiao Wang. "Steward Wu, can it be that serious?" Xiao Wang was dumbfounded. He did not expect that he was the one who stopped the girl just now. Could it be that serious? "Do you know who's organizing this auto show? Who do you think we relied on to get to where we are today?" Steward Wu growled at Xiao Wang. Chapter 260. On the other side, Yun Jian, who had successfully entered the auto show, led Zhang Xiaofeng, Ling Yichen, and Qin Sini around. "Master, I didn't expect the person in charge of this auto show to call you Sister Jian." Zhang Xiaofeng could not help grumbling. Yun Jian merely smiled without saying anything. The scale of this auto show was huge. Zhang Xiaofeng and the other two had been exclaiming since they entered the entrance. "Oh my God! The world-famous cars that we used to only see in drawings can all be seen here. I think this must be the biggest auto show that's been held in our country so far. I really don't know who organized such a grand auto show." Ling Yichen cried out in surprise. "These cars are secondary. There are 3 international limited edition supercars at the front hall. Do you guys want to go take a look?" Yun Jian asked with a raised brow at the trio's ecstatic expressions. "Wow, really? We're going." Zhang Xiaofeng shouted. With Yun Jian leading the way, the group went to the front hall. The 3 limited edition supercars at the front hall were actually the highlight of this auto show. They were the reason why both insiders and outsiders wanted to catch a glimpse of their splendor. There were only a handful of limited edition supercars in the world. As for the limited edition supercars, even some rich tycoons would find it hard to buy them. It was even more priceless in the market. Moreover, it was an auto show with 3 limited edition supercars as the highlight. How could it not attract the attention of the tycoons? The 3 limited edition supercars in the front hall were already surrounded by a crowd of onlookers. Everyone was looking at the 3 limited edition supercars with a sense of possessiveness. By the time Yun Jian and the others arrived, the place was already crowded. On the other hand, the 3 limited edition supercars were surrounded by a protective fence. The people around them only knew how to admire the cars. There was no commentator for the 3 limited edition supercars. First, it was because they were limited edition supercars. Most of the commentators would have a hard time describing the cars in a captivating manner. Secondly, it was because this was a supercar. The commentators themselves had never had the chance to touch it, so it was even harder for them to talk about it. Yun Jian saw many familiar faces in the crowd, including Mayor Gu, the mafia boss Su Zetian, and others who had been invited. She pursed her lips. Just as she was about to lead Zhang Xiaofeng and the other 2 over, she heard Qin Fangfang's voice. "Xiao Jian, are you here for a visit too? Is your mother here?" Qin Fangfang stopped Yun Jian when she saw her. When Yun Jian saw that it was her aunt, Qin Fangfang, and the others, she nodded and said, "My mom didn't come. She didn't go to work today. She said that today's event was too lively, so she didn't want to join in the fun." Hearing that her sister did not come, Qin Fangfang could not help but feel disappointed for a while. A sarcastic voice then rang. "Hey Fangfang, this is your sister's daughter who gave your family an invitation to the auto show and is now working as a cleaner in New Cruise, right?" Yun Jian heard the sharp and malicious voice. Squinting her eyes, she saw a woman dressed to the nines standing beside Zhu Hengxiang. The woman was actually Zhu Hengxiang's biological daughter, Qin Fangfang's sister-in-law, Sun Baiyan. Beside Sun Baiyan was a man with a beer belly. It was Sun Baiyan's husband, Jiang Xingnan. When Qin Yuru gave Sun Baiyan an invitation, Zhu Hengxiang called her married daughter and son-in-law to come over immediately, saying that she wanted to watch the auto show. Sun Baiyan was helpless, but he could only go along with his mother. Sun Baiyan was exactly the same as her mother, Zhu Hengxiang. She had been pampered and spoiled since she was young and had always been high and mighty. Qin Fangfang frowned when she heard Sun Baiyan's unpleasant words. "Sun Baiyan, don't you spout nonsense in front of the child." Qin Fangfang could not help shouting. "I'm not spouting nonsense. Ha, her mother is a cleaner in New Cruise. It's the truth. Can't I talk about it? Tsk, no matter how noble some people pretend to be, they can't change the fact that they came from a poor village." Chapter 261. When Qin Fangfang married Sun Baiyan, other than Sun Baiyan who treated her sincerely, she did not have a good relationship with her mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Fortunately, Sun Baiyan had always been on his wife's side. Therefore, Qin Fangfang tolerated as much as she could until now. In spite of it, her sister-in-law was getting out of hand, criticizing her sister in front of Xiao Jian. Qin Fangfang was enraged. Usually, Qin Fangfang could treat it as if nothing had happened when Sun Baiyan gossiped. But it was really inexcusable to talk about adult matters in front of a child. Moreover, when Qin Fangfang saw Sun Baiyan criticizing Qin Yuru in front of Yun Jian and in front of Yun Jian's friends, she was afraid that Yun Jian would be looked down upon by her friends. Because she was worried about Yun Jian, Qin Fangfang was truly angry with her sister-in-law for the first time. "Sun Baiyan, if you dare spout nonsense in front of the children again, I'll break your tongue," Qin Fangfang said, looking like she was really going to hit Sun Baiyan. Sun Baiyan was terrified when she saw that Qin Fangfang was truly enraged. She quickly hid behind Zhu Hengxiang and tugged at the corner of the latter's shirt, shouting, "Oh my, she's rebelling. Mom, your daughter-in-law is getting bolder. She's going to hit her sister-in-law." She sounded like she was telling the truth. Sun Baiyan's husband, Jiang Xingnan, stood like he was not there, not daring to say a word. Zhu Hengxiang was on her daughter's side, of course. When she saw how Qin Fangfang was behaving, she did not care that she was in public and acted like a shrew. She pointed at Qin Fangfang and said, "Great! You're rebelling. How dare you hit my Yan?" Just as Zhu Hengxiang was about to explode, Yun Jian shielded Qin Fangfang behind her and told Zhu Hengxiang and her friends, "Arguments aren't allowed during the auto show. If you make a ruckus again, get lost." Yun Jian's words made their eyelids twitch. Only Zhang Xiaofeng and his friends stood aside and watched. They knew that those who offended Yun Jian would not end well. "Who do you think you are?" Zhu Hengxiang shouted without thinking. Her shout was so loud that it attracted the attention of a group of big bosses who were watching the auto show. "Are we supposed to leave just because you told us to?" Zhu Hengxiang continued to curse Yun Jian loudly. Her words were getting worse and worse. "Why don't you take a look at yourself? Don't act like you're the supervisor of an auto show. Aren't you just the daughter of a cleaning lady in New Cruise? Look at your poor and pedantic appearance. What right do you have to tell us to scram? At this moment, Zhu Hengxiang seemed to have forgotten that the reason they were able to participate in the auto show was because of the disdainful cleaning auntie that she had mentioned. Biting the hand that feeds you is nothing more than this. Mom, stop talking. You've gone too far. Sun Baiwen couldn't help but frown when he heard that. He stood up and said to Zhu Hengxiang. At that moment, a middle-aged man's voice cut through the air with a hint of anger and boldness. Because Yun Jian is the director of New Cruise and the founder of this auto show. Don't tell me she doesn't have the right to chase all of you away when you're not even invited to the auto show. Zhang Jifan, who had just witnessed the scene, stomped over angrily from afar. How dare she slander their sister Jian? This old hag must be tired of living. However, after hearing Zhang Jifan's words, the surrounding people all stared at the plainly dressed young lady with their tongues tied. Zhang Xiaofeng, Qin Sini, and Ling Yichen were dumbfounded. Qin Fangfang and Sun Baiwen were stunned. Zhu Hengxiang and Sun Baiyan, on the other hand, were ashen-faced when they heard that. What? New Cruise's director was Yun Jian. Chapter 262. Shock aside, Zhang Jifan was already standing in front of Yun Jian by the time the crowd recovered. Zhang Jifan, who was dressed in a suit and leather shoes, was completely different from the gangster who made a living by lending money to loan sharks. All these changes were bestowed upon him by Yun Jian. Zhang Jifan went to Yun Jian and bowed at Yun Jian, calling out, "Sister Jian." His greeting was an announcement to everyone present that she, Yun Jian, was the director of New Cruise. There was no one else. It was not an empty promise. The crowd snapped out of their shock. Ha ha ha. A deep chuckle was heard. What came into everyone's view was Mayor Gu's smiling face. Little girl, we meet again. I really didn't expect that you would be the one who organized the auto show this time. You're New Cruise's director. Mayor Gu exclaimed before he seemed to recall something and exclaimed, no wonder you bought a storefront that wasn't worth that much at the auction the last time with a whopping 14 million yuan. So, it's to start a company? Forget where Yun Jian's money came from. Her purchase of a storefront for more than 10 million yuan was the height of stupidity in other people's eyes. Even Mayor Gu could not wrap his head around it. Now he knew. 10 million yuan aside, the storefront was definitely worth it if it was used well. Yun Jian used it to organize an auto show and publicize the company's name. Rich bosses would then come to buy cars. In this day and age, as long as the company's name was made known, even billionaires from other provinces would come here just to buy branded cars. What did some bosses use their money for? To buy branded cars and show off. Yun Jian had presented 3 limited edition sports cars in this auto show. Which car marketing company in the Z Nation could compare to this kind of capital? Limited edition supercars were hard to come by in the entire world, but Yun Jian had managed to get her hands on 3 of them. When the time came, she would be able to earn tens of millions by selling a luxury car. The money that she, Yun Jian, had spent would be as good as flowing water. Moreover, the effect of her promotion of the company had already caused a huge commotion in the automobile industry of Z country. New Cruise would probably be the first choice for rich bosses to buy cars in the future. However, the people next to Mayor Gu were paying attention to the sentence. Yun Jian spent more than 14 million yuan to buy this store at the auction. More than 14 million. Heavens. Not to mention the 1998 era, even in the modern era, this was a huge sum of money that ordinary people might not be able to save in their entire lives. Even Qin Fangfang's husband's family, Sun Baiwen's family, which could be said to be a rich and famous family, only had a few million in assets. What about Yun Jian? Buying a storefront cost more than 10 million. This was the difference. Zhang Xiaofeng and the other 2 were stunned once again. Now Zhang Xiaofeng's blood was boiling. Who would dare to say that his master was poor in the future? He would fight with his life on the line. Mayor Gu, we meet again. Yun Jian squinted and nodded at Mayor Gu. Not bad. This little girl has a bright future ahead of her. Mayor Gu squinted and laughed out loud. He could not help but compliment her. After Yun Jian and Mayor Gu nodded, she turned to look at the pale Zhu Hengxiang and said, as you said, my mom works in my company. What's wrong with sweeping the floor? She's experiencing life. Unlike some people who look glamorous on the surface but are as shrewish as a shrew behind her back. Zhu Hengxiang had just mocked Yun Jian for being poor but learning how to do things from rich people. Now Yun Jian was returning the same words to her. Chapter 263. It was Zhu Hengxiang's first time being reprimanded in public. Zhu Hengxiang was born in a prestigious family with superior conditions since she was young, and her husband was a match for her after she got married. She was a typical upper-class family. Zhu Hengxiang had never been scolded like that in her entire life. However, no matter how dumb she was, she would not go against Yun Jian. Yun Jian was the director of New Cruise. How would Zhu Hengxiang dare to retort with such a status? Ha! Yun Jian chuckled when she saw that Zhu Hengxiang dared not respond to her anymore. Then Yun Jian pulled Qin Fangfang, who had yet to react to the situation, and warned Zhu Hengxiang and Sun Baiyan, who stood beside her. If I find out that my aunt is bullied by you guys in the future, don't blame me for not reminding you. Let's see which manufacturer dares to continue working with your family's car dealership in the future. Yun Jian was blatantly threatening them. Without the cooperation of a manufacturer, there was only one outcome for a car dealership: bankruptcy. In spite of it, only she, Yun Jian, was capable of uttering such arrogant words. At the same time, Yun Jian's message was that she had the ability to make an established car dealership go bankrupt. Perhaps, if Yun Jian had said something like that before this, everyone would have treated it as a joke, thinking that she was young and frivolous. Now, however, an underage girl like her could organize such a grand auto show. The crowd thought that she was capable of doing what she said. Zhu Hengxiang paled. She had never thought that she would get herself into such a mess. She also did not expect Qin Fangfang's niece to be so capable after being looked down upon by her for so many years in poverty. She dared to bid for a storefront for more than 10 million yuan. Zhu Hengxiang knew very well that the Sun family's total assets were only a few million yuan. Compared to Yun Jian, it was nothing. Xiao Jian, alright, that's enough. Qin Fangfang finally snapped back to reality and held Yun Jian, who stood up for her. After all, this was her mother-in-law. Even if her mother-in-law and sister-in-law were not on good terms, they still had to live together. Yun Jian stopped talking after hearing Qin Fangfang's words. Of course, she knew when to stop. She had already warned Zhu Hengxiang and Sun Baiyan. Unless they were idiots, they would not dare to do anything else. Yun Jian also knew that if she continued to speak, it would make things difficult for Qin Fangfang. Thus they stopped talking about this topic. For the sake of Qin Fangfang and the fact that Zhu Hengxiang and Sun Baiyan didn't dare to speak since just now, Yun Jian didn't really drive them out. However, no one paid any attention to them. At this time, Yun Jian was already chatting happily with Mayor Gu, while Zhang Xiaofeng and the other two followed beside her. Yun Jian led Mayor Gu to the 3 limited edition sports cars and introduced them to Mayor Gu one by one. This is a Pagani Zonda. It's a tricolor sports car from Italy, and there's only one in the world. It uses special LED lights on the front and back of the car. It's styled like an airplane's headlights. Yun Jian's fluent explanation stood out. Other than Mayor Gu, everyone who was standing in front of the sports cars to watch was captivated. If Yun Jian was the director of New Cruise, she would know the introduction of these limited edition sports cars despite her young age. Moreover, her explanation was extremely smooth. It was as if she knew these limited edition sports cars very well. Chapter 264. The auto show went on smoothly. After sending Qin Fangfang and her family off, the show came to a close. See you next time, girl. Mayor Gu said to Yun Jian when he left with Su Zetian. As he said that, Mayor Gu gestured to Yun Jian. Also, our government will support any promotional projects New Cruise has in the future. You can come to me if you run into any trouble. With Mayor Gu's assurance, Yun Jian smiled gratefully. Although she did not need help, it was good to have Mayor Gu's goodwill. After sending off everyone who came to watch the auto show, there were only the staff clearing the venue. Zhang Xiaofeng, Zhang Jifan, and Zhang Jifan left. Looking at Zhang Xiaofeng, Zhang Jifan, and Zhang Jifan, who were holding back their questions, Yun Jian smiled and told them, if you're willing, you can work for Jifan in the future. Yun Jian was planning to let Zhang Xiaofeng, Zhang Jifan, and Zhang Jifan join her New Cruise. Zhang Xiaofeng, Zhang Jifan, and Zhang Jifan came from rich families. They had lived a life of having everything taken care of and had never worked independently. Did Yun Jian mean that she wanted them to join New Cruise? This was no doubt a chance to break away from family and express themselves. We're willing, of course we're willing. All 3 of them shouted in unison. Yun Jian pressed her lips into a smile. After the auto show, all sorts of sports cars, regular sedans and affordable sedans that New Cruise promoted went on the market. To everyone's surprise, New Cruise had sold 368 cars in less than 3 days of official car sales. This meant that they sold over 100 sedans on average in these few days. There were many expensive sports cars among them. Selling one of them would earn them millions of yuan. Of course, Longmen City's big bosses were not the only buyers. Some business tycoons who came because of their fame were there as well. New crews rose rapidly, earning a net profit of 30 million yuan in the month. The astounding sales made it the top car company in the country, let alone Longmen City's car marketing company. The company's reputation soared and swept the country. As the director of new crews, Yun Jian was sitting in the classroom, her fair and slender fingers twirling a black pen leisurely as she worked on a blank test paper on her desk. Yun Jian was in the first semester of her third year in junior high school. She would face the first major exam of her life in half a semester, the senior high school entrance exams. Therefore, the school's teachers had increased their students' learning tasks, such as endless test papers every day. Yun Jian, while it was still all right, Zhang and Qin Sini, their heads were dizzy from the test paper. This weekend, Yun Jian was invited by Chu Ning and the others to celebrate the successful completion of their mission. Moreover, Gu Junjian had already applied for a reward for them from their superiors. Other than some monetary rewards, the 7 of them were directly promoted to official members of the Special Forces. It was no doubt a joyous event for Chu Ning and the rest. After some discussion, they decided to go on a trip this weekend to relax and change their moods. On Saturday morning, Yun Jian carried her school bag stuffed with a dozen hard-boiled eggs that Qin Yiru had prepared for her and went to meet up with Chu Ning and the rest. "Hey Yun Jian, we're here." Chu Ning was the first to see Yun Jian and greeted her. Yun Jian went over. The group then boarded the train to a famous mountain. Chapter 265. The train arrived at a place called Jinglian Town. The famous mountain was called Weiwu Mountain. The mountain was very high above sea level and the mountain path was rugged and steep. Jinglian Town was an ancient town attached to the foot of Weiwu Mountain. It was not without reason that this place was chosen as a place to travel. It was because Weiwu Mountain was high above sea level, steep and winding. It was very suitable for adventurous and exciting activities. There was a well-known fact about Weiwu Mountain. Throughout the year there were many tourists who wanted to climb this mountain, but only 1 in 10 had the ability to reach the top. This rumor attracted a large number of mountain climbing enthusiasts, especially when everyone wanted to be the only 1 out of 10 who could climb to the top of the mountain. However, many people returned without success. In fact, there was no one at the top, but according to those who had reached the top, tents could be set up on the mountain as long as they brought their own tents. Chu Ning and the rest alighted from the train. When they arrived at Jinglian Town, they were stunned by the towering Weiwu Mountain in front of them. Yun Jian merely squinted her eyes, but she raised a brow subtly when she saw Weiwu Mountain that was so tall that she could not even see its peak. "Wow, this is Weiwu Mountain. To be honest, I've wanted to climb this mountain for a long time. I heard that only 1 in 10 can climb to the top from the bottom of this mountain." Aha. Chu Xiangnan looked around the bottom of the mountain, his face agitated. "Then let's go. Let's see who can run faster." Chu Ning rubbed her hands excitedly and was about to run ahead. "Everyone, wait." The early morning sun shone on Yun Jian. It was very dazzling. Just as Yun Jian and the rest were about to go up the mountain, a voice came from behind them. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes and turned sideways. She saw a few young men and women in their 20s standing behind them. This group of people was also carrying a travel bag. It seemed that they were also here to climb Weiwu Mountain. The person who just spoke was the sunny man standing at the front with a smile on his face. "Hello, I'm Qin Yan. These are my classmates. May I ask if you are planning to go up the mountain too?" The man with a bright smile introduced in a friendly manner and asked. "Yes." Yun Jian stood at the back of the group, but also at the front of Qin Yan. She nodded and said, "Ah, that's great. Can we go up the mountain together? It's like this, we are university students. This time we are a group to go up the Weiwu Mountain. However, we are unfamiliar with the place, so we want to find someone to go up the mountain together," Qin Yan said. The sunlight bathed Qin Yan's face. This Qin Yan was still a very eye-catching handsome guy. "Sure." Chu Ning, who was walking at the front, saw Qin Yan's handsome face. She ran back as if she was mesmerized. She looked at Qin Yan with a smile and extended her hand to introduce herself. "I'm Chu Ning. Let's go together." That's great." Qin Yan breathed in relief, but his gaze was on Yun Jian, who had her hands in her pockets. One had to admit that Yun Jian was very eye-catching. "Brother Yan, why are we looking for them?" "I don't agree." At this moment, a pretty girl with 2 ponytails standing behind Qin Yan spoke up. The girl was about 19 or 20 years old. She seemed to have noticed Qin Yan's gaze on Yun Jian. Her angry face wrinkled even more. Chapter 266. Yeah, Qinyan, I think little sister Xiaofeng is right. Why should we form a group? It's better for us to go our own ways. Look at them. They're as thin as a piece of paper. They probably won't even make it halfway up the mountain. We can't let unimportant people drag down our own progress. Standing next to the girl called Little Sister Xiaofeng, a man with a large build and weighing 150 pounds spoke to Qinyan. There was no trace of politeness in his tone. The aggressive girl just now was called Wang Fengfeng. She was the prettiest girl in their university's finance and accounting department. The large man who spoke up for her was her suitor, Wu Hang. Wang Fengfeng and Wu Hang's tone was full of confidence. In fact, the group of university students led by Qinyan to climb Weiwu Mountain had all learned martial arts. At the same time, they were also members of the university's Taekwondo club. They had also participated in Taekwondo, Wushu, and wrestling competitions many times. They had defeated many of their peers and won many championship titles. Therefore, the tone of his voice was full of arrogance, and there was a hint of pride in it. Wang Fengfeng, on the other hand, favored Qinyan. She was infuriated when she saw him staring at Yunjian like that. In addition, Yunjian's group of 7 did indeed look thin and weak. Because of the intensive training in the military training camp, even Chu Ning, who originally had a little baby fat and a small belly, had lost a lot of weight. The current appearance of the 7 of them was symmetrical, thin and weak. Therefore, Wang Fengfeng and Wu Hang seized the opportunity to say that they were weak. Do you think we want to go with you? We'll go our own way. Who would feel good after hearing that? Chu Xiangnan was the first to shout back. Then he turned around and left. Chu Ning heard Qinyan's classmates, Wang Fengfeng and Wu Hang, and suddenly felt a little awkward. It seems like your classmates don't welcome us. Then let's part ways here. Compared to the emotional ups and downs of the few people, Yunjian was extremely calm. She said to Qinyan indifferently, then turned around and walked to the bottom of Weiwu Mountain. She had never been a person who looked for trouble. Seeing that Yunjian had made her stand, the others followed suit. Chu Ning, who was standing beside Qinyan, couldn't help but take a few more glances at him. In the end, she had no choice but to say goodbye and chase after Yunjian and the others. The morning light shone on the girl who was walking towards the top of the mountain step by step, covering Yunjian with a thin layer of light. Qinyan was stunned the moment he saw this naturally noble and inviolable figure. At this time he stared at Yunjian for a long time, unable to move his eyes away. Brother Yen? Brother Yen? Brother Yen. Wang Fengfeng waved her hand in front of Qinyan's face several times before he retracted his gaze. Wang Fengfeng was even more annoyed. Why was that girl so annoying? Yunjian and the others had already climbed up the mountain along the cement path. They could also feel that the mountain road was getting steeper and steeper, and their strides were getting more and more strenuous. Along the way, Yunjian and the rest stopped for quite some time. They had a lot of snacks in their bags, so they stopped every now and then or drank a few sips of water. Save me. Save my son, save him. At this time, a woman's scream came from the mountainside where Yunjian and the others were. Yunjian and the others looked at each other, packed up their bags and walked back. After going down a few steep slopes, they saw a woman standing at the edge of the cliff and looking down. The woman's face was pale with fright, and she was so scared that her voice was almost muffled. Yunjian walked over to take a look and saw that at the bottom of the steep cliff, a 7 or 8-year-old boy was hanging from a tree that grew on the edge of the cliff. The boy was hanging in the air and his shirt was dangling from the tree, swaying back and forth. If the boy's shirt were to let go of the tree branch, what would face him would be a bottomless abyss, a cliff that couldn't be seen at all. There's a child hanging from a tree. Below is a cliff. Yunjian and the others had just walked to the edge of the cliff when they saw a group of people coming down the slope. Wang Fengfeng, who was walking in front, pointed at the bottom of the cliff and screamed in fear. Chapter 267. Qinyan caught a glimpse of Yunjian, who was coming back. Without any makeup, Yunjian's jade-like skin was glossy and delicate. She had a natural beauty. She pursed her lips into a slight smile. Her upturned lips carried a kind of suffocating and mesmerizing charm that was eye-catching. Qinyan thought, this is love at first sight. Qinyan wanted to go with Yunjian at first, so he didn't ask the other members of his group. He just wanted to get to know Yunjian. And now, perhaps he wanted to play the hero in front of Yunjian. Qinyan took off his black coat and handed it to Wang Fengfeng. Take it. Then Qinyan walked towards the little boy who was hanging on the branch of the cliff. The little boy's mother was crying and shouting for help. It wasn't hard to see that the little boy accidentally stepped on the flat ground just now because she wasn't paying attention. The little boy's small and thin body directly slipped over the iron fence. If it weren't for the rows of branches growing on the edge of the cliff, which the locals cultivated to prevent people from falling off the cliff, the little boy would probably have fallen off the cliff and been smashed to pieces. Brother Yen, don't. Qin Yen wanted to save the little boy, but Wang Fengfeng pulled his sleeve. This cliff is so high. And it's so steep. What if something happens to you? Wang Fengfeng's worried eyes looked at Qin Yen, her eyes filled with fear. Then Wang Fengfeng looked at the little boy's mother who was standing on the edge of the cliff and desperately begging for help with disgust and added, she didn't take care of her child. Why should she beg others to save her child? I think this woman deserves it. Qin Yen was stopped by Wang Fengfeng for a moment and he hesitated. Indeed, he just wanted to show off in front of Yun Jian, but the little boy was hanging on the branch of the cliff. There were no tools to save him here. If he went to save him, what if he fell down instead? Thinking of this, Qin Yan's handsome face showed an inexplicable look of fear. Yun Jian saw all these expressions. She just smiled contemptuously. Then she took off her backpack and slid it to the ground. Her fair and slender fingers pulled the zipper of the backpack and she quickly took something out of it. Flying claw. Yun Jian, are you actually remembered to bring this? Chu Ning was still worried about the little boy who was dangling from the cliff and was about to fall when she saw Yun Jian take out a flying claw. She cried out in surprise. Military flying claw. With this thing, as long as it was fixed properly and he grabbed the rope, he could hang down to save the little boy. Yes. Yun Jian nodded. She swung her flying claw and it caught a firm spot on the edge of the cliff. Then she jumped off the cliff. When Qin Yan and the others saw this scene, their eyelids twitched tightly. When they came back to their senses, they were all shocked, especially when they saw Yun Jian take out the flying claws. Who were they? Why would they bring a flying claw, a weapon that belonged to the special forces, when they were traveling? Just as they thought of this, Qin Yan and the others were stunned. They saw Yun Jian move in a perfect arc. She used the flying claw and leaned towards the little boy. Then she reached out and picked up the little boy. At the moment when everyone's heart skipped a beat, she retracted the flying claw in her hand and stomped on a protruding cliff point. Then she jumped up nimbly. When they looked again, Yun Jian had already rescued the little boy. Meanwhile, Qin Yan and the others were dumbfounded. How was it that Yun Jian, who looked so thin and frail, was so agile and swift? This didn't make sense. Especially Wang Fengfeng and Wu Hang, who had said bad things about Yun Jian and the others. At this moment, there was no trace of redness on their faces. When Yun Jian rescued the little boy and placed him on the ground, she saw the little boy's face clearly. The little boy was very delicate and pretty. His skin was smooth and lustrous and his cheeks were rosy. It was as if he didn't realize that he had just experienced a life-and-death situation. Yun Jian was dumbfounded. Under everyone's gaze, her beautiful pupils contracted. She stared at the little boy for a moment, her emotions changing rapidly. Chapter 268. Yun Jian sized up the little boy. Looking at the little boy's face that was identical to her little brother's, she couldn't help but think of her little brother's lively smile when she first saw him in her previous life. She also remembered the dried tear stains at the corner of her little brother's eyes when he died tragically. Little Zhu? Yun Jian reached out her hand. Although she had always been strong, her voice was trembling when she spoke. Her little brother's name was Yun Zhu. She still remembered the first time her little brother had seen her in her previous life. He had used his big black eyes to stare at her. His face was rosy, his lips were white, and his words were clear. He had blinked at her and said, "Are you my big sister?" Then he happily grabbed her big hand with his short and cold little fingers. He was overjoyed. That's great. Little Zhu has a big sister too. Little Zhu has a family too. Yun Jian and Yun Zhu's biological parents died in a car accident when Yun Zhu was 4 years old. The reason was that Yun Jian was kidnapped by the organization when she was very young. Her biological parents searched for her for more than 10 years. In the end, both of them died in a car accident during the search. Yun Zhu grew up in an orphanage. All these years, Yun Jian was trained as an agent in the Inhun organization. When Yun Jian had the ability to find her family before she was kidnapped, she only had her little brother left. Later, her little brother was used to threaten her and died tragically. Yun Jian's heart was not made of steel. She could be angry and hate this kind of world. The little boy in front of her was frightened by Yun Jian's sudden outstretched hand. He shrank back. Zhu. At this time, the little boy's mother rushed over with tears in her eyes. She hugged the little boy tightly. The fear in her heart could not be described by the word fear. Mom, this big sister seems to know my name. The little boy pointed at Yun Jian and said innocently to the woman. However, his eyes were dull. Yes, Yun Jian, what's wrong with you? Everyone was surprised by Yun Jian's actions. Chuning could not help but be the first to ask. So this little boy was also called Yunju. He was the same as her little brother. I'm fine. Yun Jian closed her eyes and wore a half-pressed smile. Regardless of whether this little boy was her younger brother or not, since he had the same face as her younger brother and even had the same name as her younger brother, this gave her some hope. Perhaps her younger brother was still alive in another way. Little girl, thank you. Thank you for saving my son. Thank you. After Yunju's mother settled her child down, she walked over to Yun Jian to thank her. She was so sincere that she almost knelt down to thank Yun Jian. In the end, she was stopped by Yun Jian. At this moment, Chen Yan and the others who were standing at the side were very embarrassed. In the beginning, this group of people all thought that Yun Jian and the others were cowards, so they were very straightforward with their words. But what was the result? A 15 or 16-year-old girl had single-handedly rescued a little boy who was hanging on the edge of a cliff. By this time, Yun Jian had already met Yunju's mother. Yunju's mother was called Yun Hailan. She was a single mother, and Yunju took her surname. This time she came to Weiwu Mountain for her child, Duan Lian. According to Yun Hailan's mother, Yunju had changed completely after he fell seriously ill a few months ago. His eyes became dull and he did not like to talk. Sometimes he would even scream in his nightmares, "No, don't kill me. Sob, 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 please don't kill me." Usually he became very timid. At the age of 8, he did not even dare to go to the toilet alone in the middle of the night. Yun Hailan came to Weiwu Mountain because of Duan Lian and Yunju's courage, but she did not expect something like this to happen. She did not expect that Yunju would fall down the cliff just because she was not paying attention. When Yun Jian heard Yun Hailan's words, she froze on the spot. A few months ago, wasn't that when she was reborn? Chapter 269. Could it be that her brother was reborn? Yun Jian suppressed the excitement in her heart. However, she knew one thing. Even if the little boy in front of her was her brother, he did not remember her. However, Yun Jian knew that her brother had been traumatized in his previous life. He was only 7 or 8 years old, but his head had been cut off. When he died, there were still traces of tears on his tender cheeks. Mom, let's go home. At this moment, Yunju stretched out his hands to Yun Hailan. His face was still expressionless as he said those words in a daze. Okay. Let's go home. Yun Hailan reached out and carried Yunju. Then she apologized to Yun Jian. Ju wanted to go home, so I brought him home first. I didn't expect something like this to happen today. I won't bring him to such a dangerous place in the future. By the way, my house is nearby. If it's convenient, you can stay at my house for a few nights. This Weiwu Mountain is not easy to climb. Most people will come down not long after going up the mountain. The closer the mountain is to the top, the steeper the slope. Moreover, it could be life-threatening at any time. Therefore, most people would not risk their lives to climb up the mountain. Okay. Yun Jian nodded. Her eyes were fixed on Yunju. Then she made a decision. I'm not going up the mountain. It seems that I'll have to trouble you for a few nights. She had to figure out what happened to her brother. What? Yun Jian, you're not going up the mountain? Chu Xiangnan was completely unaware of the situation. He shouted in surprise. Yes, I'm not going. In fact, whether or not she climbed the mountain did not matter much to Yun Jian. Therefore, she nodded and replied to Chu Xiangnan. You guys go ahead, Yun Jian said to Chu Xiangnan, Chu Ning and the others. Then she went down the mountain with Yun Hailan. Chen Yan watched Yun Jian go down the mountain. He wanted to say something, but in the end he went up the mountain with Wang Fengfeng and the others. Meanwhile, Yun Jian followed them to Yun Hailan's house alone. Yun Hailan's house was very shabby. She was a single mother, but her family was much more shabby than Yun Gang's. The few rooms here were made up of temporary wooden planks, barely enough for people to live in. You live here? Yun Jian frowned slightly. Well, I hope you don't mind. Yun Hailan smiled at Yun Jian with a hint of apology in her smile. I won't. Yun Jian followed Yun Hailan into the house made of wooden planks. As she walked into the house, she could even feel the cold winter wind passing through the thin wooden planks and blowing at the people in the house. Sorry, my house is a little shabby. You can sit anywhere, Yun Hailan said to Yun Jian. Yun Jian did not stand on ceremony. She sat down directly. While Yun Jian sat down and chatted with Yunju, Yun Hailan took the opportunity to start working. Because Yun Hailan's family was poor, she could only rely on handicrafts to make a living. Mom, I'm cold. At this moment, Yunju, who was wearing thin clothes, curled up and shouted. Yun Hailan gritted her teeth and said to Yunju, "Be good, or I'll buy you a cotton-padded coat when I get my salary in a few days." Yun Hailan's family was so poor that they could barely afford food and clothing. The residents of Jinglian town generally lived in poor conditions. Yun Hailan had no work experience and now she had to raise her child, so she was even more destitute. She did not even have the money to go to the hospital when Yunju's behavior became strange in recent months. When Yunjian heard this, she took off her thick down jacket and put it on Yunju. This is not right." Yun Hailan saw this and reached out to refuse. "The child is still growing. He needs warmth," Yunjian explained. Yun Hailan was silent for a few seconds. She looked at Yunjian gratefully and said with tears in her eyes, "Thank you." Chapter 270. When Yun Hailan heard the banging outside the door, she pricked her fingertip with the needle she was holding in her panic. She did not care about the blood that was slowly flowing out of her fingertip as she hurried over to push Yunjian away. "Young lady, go hide in the house first. Go now." Yun Hailan pushed Yunjian into the house. Yunjian frowned and shook her head. The group of people outside obviously came with ill intentions. How could she leave Yun Hailan to hide? Bring your sister inside to play," Yun Hailan said to Yunju, who was sitting on a stool when she could not persuade Yunjian. Yunju was not a talkative person, but he was still very obedient to his mother. Yunju went over to hold Yunjian's hand and led her into the house. Yunjian followed Yunju into the house because she saw Yun Hailan telling her softly, "I'm fine. Young lady, look after Zhu for me." After Yunjian and Yunju hid in the house, Yun Hailan turned to open the door. Creak, the thin door panel was opened. Yunjian could still see the scene through the crack of the door from the other room. Standing outside the door was a tall and burly man with thick arms and a bulging beer belly. Jinglian town was not a peaceful town because the residents here were different from Longmen City. The living environment here was a few levels worse than Longmen City, so there was more social unrest here. The residents here would be forcefully collected protection fees. It was not unusual to see such incidents. Even the police could not do anything about these people who collected protection fees. Because these people were all gangsters, all of them wielded knives and guns. Most importantly, these people had someone backing them up, so even the police could not do anything about them. There was a group of people standing behind the man, each of them holding something like metal rods in their hands. It was obvious that they were not good people. At this time, the tall man in the lead shook his fat body and stretched out a fat hand. He was holding a blade of grass in his mouth. He looked at Yun Hailan arrogantly. "Where's the money?" Yun Hailan looked a little scared, but she forced herself to look at them normally. "Brother Nyo, our family is tight on money recently. Can you give me a few more days? After I finish this batch of work, I'll give you the money as soon as I get paid. What do you think?" Yun Hailan pleaded. She really had no money. If she had some extra money on hand, she wouldn't have refused to take her child to the hospital when he was so emotionally unstable. "Motherf *ker, who the f *ck are you trying to fool? The other families have already paid the protection fees, and you're the only one who's still dawdling. Brothers, let's go. Don't talk nonsense with this woman. Let's smash her house and see if she can pay for it." The man called Brother Nyo waved an iron rod and was about to hit Yun Hailan's thin body. Yun Hailan was already prepared to take a beating. Brother Nyo's group was unreasonable. Because they were gangsters, they usually stirred up trouble and had a powerful background. Even the police couldn't do anything to them. It was common for Yun Hailan to be beaten. Of course, before she was beaten, she would lock Yunju in the room so that the child wouldn't see it. She asked Yunjian to hide as well because Yunjian was pretty. Brother Nyo's group was not only greedy, but they would also forcefully occupy beautiful women when they saw them. Many innocent girls in town had been defiled by this group of people. She was indebted to Yunjian. Of course, she couldn't watch Yunjian be bullied, so she asked them to hide and keep quiet. Just as the iron rod was about to hit Yun Hailan, a pair of fair and clean hands suddenly grabbed the iron rod. In the blink of an eye, Yunjian had already dashed out of the house next door. When Brother Nyo and his group saw Yunjian, their eyes lit up. What a beautiful woman. Chapter 271. Yunjian's appearance stunned Brother Nyo and the others, but at the same time, they also looked at her with lustful eyes. "Yo, Yun Hailan, when did you hide such a beautiful girl in your house?" Brother Nyo's tone immediately softened, and his tone was not as tough as before. "Why did you come out? Go quickly, this has nothing to do with you." Yun Hailan was shocked to see Yunjian come out, and she quickly pushed Yunjian out of the house. Yun Hailan actually just wanted to protect Yun Jian. You're here and you want to leave? Ah. Brother Nyo and the others blocked the door and stared at Yun Jian with evil eyes. Yun Hailan, how about this? Let this little girl accompany us and we'll waive this month's protection fee. What do you think? Brother Nyo rubbed his chin and looked at Yun Jian, and said to her with an evil smile, as if Yun Hailan had gotten a great bargain. Dream on. Yun Hailan gritted her teeth, and she suddenly summoned her courage to shout at Brother Nyo and the others. Yun Jian was her benefactor, and Yun Hailan did not expect that Brother Nyo and the others would come to collect protection fee at this time, and she also did not expect that Yun Jian would not listen to her and come out to stand up for her. Naturally, she would not let Yun Jian fall into the hands of evil people. Mother F***er, when did you get so bold? I'm giving you a chance today because of you. I won't collect this month's protection fee from your family, and your F***king refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit? Brother Nyo said, and then he angrily smashed the iron rod on the door. Hearing Brother Nyo's words, Yun Jian laughed. Do you know the consequences of messing with the lion's head? Yun Jian raised her eyebrows. She suddenly curled her lips and looked at Brother Nyo and the others with disdain. Yo, little beauty, I can't guess such a deep mystery, but I know you're going to be mine soon. Brother Nyo narrowed his eyes and stared at Yun Jian. As he spoke, he even reached out his hand and wanted to pounce on Yun Jian. Brother Nyo immediately rushed towards Yun Jian, but before he could reach her, he was stopped by Yun Hailan. Yun Hailan's frail body blocked Brother Nyo and the others. She shouted desperately at Yun Jian, "Take Zhu, and run. Jump out of the back window. Don't look back. Go. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. Run. This word had never appeared in Yun Jian's dictionary. Just as Yun Jian was about to kick Brother Nyo and his men away, Yun Zhu's voice was heard in the house. Mom? Yun Zhu had stood outside the house unknowingly. He saw the scene in front of him and cried out involuntarily. Especially when he saw his mother desperately blocking Brother Nyo and his men with her body, not allowing them to come over. Brother Nyo and his men were even holding various weapons such as knives and iron rods. A horrifying image suddenly appeared in Yun Zhu's mind. Knives killing people. No, don't kill me. Yun Zhu suddenly hugged his head as if he had recalled something. He squatted down in pain. Xiao Zhu. Yun Jian's attention was attracted by Yun Zhu's actions. She stopped kicking Brother Nyo and his men and walked anxiously towards Yun Zhu. Xiao Zhu, what's wrong? Yun Jian would only lose control when her brother was in danger. Yun Jian squatted down to check on Yun Zhu's condition. On the other side, Brother Nyo, who was blocked by Yun Hailan at the door, suddenly rolled his eyes. He pulled out a dagger in disgust and stabbed Yun Hailan's abdomen. It was not until Yun Hailan screamed in pain that Yun Jian came back to her senses. Brother Nyo twisted the knife in Yun Hailan's abdomen a few times and then pushed Yun Hailan to the ground. Damn it. Yun Jian's eyes turned fierce and her pupils suddenly changed color. She was so worried about Yun Zhu that she forgot about Yun Hailan. She did not expect Brother Nyo to really stab Yun Hailan. When Yun Zhu saw this scene and recalled the past in his mind, he was in great pain. Yun Jian stood up from Yun Zhu's side. Her cruel eyes were filled with burning anger. She was really angry. Chapter 272. At first, Brother Nyo and the others didn't see Yun Jian as a threat at all. After all, in their eyes, how old was Yun Jian? No matter how powerful she was just a little girl. Where could she go? But the moment Yun Jian took out the butterfly knife, Brother Nyo and the others' eyelids twitched. F***ck, are you for real? The little beauty is hiding a weapon on her? Brother Nyo screamed. But even if you have a weapon on you, do you think you can beat us? Pfft. Brother Nyo looked at Yun Jian with contempt as she walked towards them with the butterfly knife. Just as he sneered, Yun Jian had already made her move. The butterfly knife in her hand moved nimbly between her fingers and then stabbed into Brother Nyo's abdomen at a strange angle. Brother Nyo's eyes widened. He didn't even have the chance to react before he was stabbed in the abdomen by this seemingly harmless girl in front of him. You. Brother Nyo shouted desperately. You're not human. You're not human. How was it possible for a little girl to be able to display such quick skills? But Brother Nyo couldn't finish his words. The moment Yun Jian withdrew the knife, Brother Nyo fainted completely. With a bang, he fell to the ground and stopped breathing in the next second. Dead. Brother Nyo is dead. Seeing that Brother Nyo was killed by Yun Jian with such terrifying skills, Brother Nyo's group of brothers became restless. Then they all ran away faster than anyone else. No one cared about Brother Nyo's life or death. This little girl could kill. She could kill. Seeing this group of people run away, Yun Jian didn't chase after them. After all, the person who stabbed Yun Hailan was Brother Niu. And now Brother Niu was dead. Yun Jian walked over to check on Yun Hailan, who was stabbed on the ground by Brother Niu. She touched Yun Hailan's nose with her finger and calmed down. Fortunately, Yun Hailan wasn't dead. Then Yun Jian pressed around Yun Hailan's wound and found that the wound wasn't deep. But if it dragged on for a long time, even if the wound wasn't deep, the person would bleed to death. The equipment here wasn't complete. She could help Yun Hailan remove the knife, but without the proper equipment, the wound could easily get infected. Therefore, Yun Jian took out the hemostatic medicine that she had bought after her rebirth and used it to stop Yun Hailan's bleeding. Then Yun Jian ran out to stop a car. She was unfamiliar with this place and didn't even know where the nearest hospital was. Furthermore, Yun Hailan's wound wasn't suitable for her to carry her to the hospital. Fortunately, Yun Jian quickly stopped a kind-hearted Audi sports car at the entrance. The driver was a middle-aged man. When he heard that someone was injured, he hurriedly helped Yun Jian carry Yun Hailan into the car and send her to the hospital. Yun Jian held Yunju's hand and went to the nearest town hospital together. Yunju did not say a word along the way, but his dull eyes had become much clearer. Yun Jian didn't stop until Yun Hailan was sent to the hospital's operating room. She knew that with Yun Hailan's current injury, the hospital's medical skills could save her. It was the first time that the middle-aged man had seen a girl like Yun Jian who could remain calm in such a terrible situation, so he stayed with her until Yun Hailan's life was no longer in danger. Yun Jian thanked him and personally saw him off. Yun Hailan hadn't woken up after the operation, but she had been moved to the ward. After finishing the formalities, Yun Jian took Yunju's little hand and walked to the ward. "Sister." Yunju, who had been silent all this time, suddenly called out. At this moment, walking in the deserted corridor of the hospital, Yun Jian's hand holding Yunju's hand suddenly paused. Yunju's next words almost made her, who had always been stubborn, cry. "You're my sister, right? I know you're my sister." Chapter 273. Yunju's rosy cheeks were adorable. There was a hint of maturity in his tender face. He looked very much like Qingji, but it was not difficult to tell that he was a young boy with regular features. When he grew up, he would definitely be a charming man. They were blood relatives in their previous lives. Even though Yun Jian and Yunju had changed their bodies, they could still feel each other's feelings. Yun Jian smiled. A teardrop formed in her eyes. It swirled, but it did not fall in the end. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She just squatted down and hugged Yunju. She pressed her chin against Yunju's shoulder and nodded gently. Yunju raised his head. He reached out his little hand to grab the corner of Yun Jian's clothes. There was a faint smile on his little face. "Sister, yes." Yun Jian stroked Yunju's hair. All the regret and pain seemed to disappear at this moment. At this moment, the feeling of regaining what she had lost was indescribable by Yun Jian. Her younger brother's death had always been a knot in her heart. Now that her younger brother had been reborn like her shackled heart was also freed. However, she still wanted to take revenge for what happened in her previous life. Her younger brother did not die. This was a favor from God. However, the pain that her younger brother had suffered was real. Yun Jian swore that if she had the chance in the future, she would let the Inferno Ring suffer the consequences of angering her. Yun Hailan's injury was not serious in Yun Jian's mind. Perhaps because of her experience in her previous life, Yun Jian thought that as long as it was not fatal, it was not a serious injury. However, in the eyes of ordinary people, Yun Hailan had already been seriously injured. Yun Hailan had been stabbed in the abdomen. The wound was blurry. She had to lie in bed for half a year to recover slowly. In short, she had to recuperate slowly to recover to her previous state. Yun Jian sent Yun Hailan abroad to recuperate. She also told Yun Hailan that she would take good care of Yunju. At first, Yun Hailan was too embarrassed to agree. After all, Yun Jian had paid for her treatment after the accident. She didn't have the face to ask Yun Jian to help her take care of the child. However, after Yunju expressed her willingness to follow Yun Jian, Yun Hailan relented. Before Yun Hailan was sent abroad to recuperate, she thanked Yun Jian with tears in her eyes and told Yunju to listen to Yun Jian. Yun Jian contacted the best hospital overseas. By the time she sent Yun Hailan over, it was already the afternoon of the next day. The next day, Yun Jian held Yunju's hand and showed her most beautiful smile. They stood under the sun and waited for Chu Ning and the others who had just come down from Weiwu Mountain. Chu Ning and the others arrived at the top of the mountain and stayed there for a night before coming down. They had talked about all this in their phone calls. In the end, Yun Jian did not see Chen Yan and the rest of them again. When Chu Ning and the others boarded the train back to Longmen City with Yun Jian, Chu Xiangnan even teased Yun Jian with a chuckle. "Oh, I didn't know that you, Yun Jian, have the ability to kidnap someone's little brother. So, you're planning to do this by not going up the mountain with us." As he spoke, Chu Xiangnan glanced at Yunju. Yunju shrunk toward Yun Jian shyly. "No one will think you're a mute if you don't speak." Chu Ning added to Chu Xiangnan with a grin. "Or maybe you want me to turn you into a mute." Yun Jian swung the butterfly knife in her hand with a grin. Her smile was beautiful and innocent. "No, no, no. Forget it." Chu Xiangnan waved his hand immediately. The group was overjoyed. Even Jiang Weiwei, who had always disliked interacting with others, was slowly becoming a part of the group. Jiang Weiwei's change had only begun recently. The train returned to Longmen City at night. After Yun Jian parted with the group, she held Xiao Yunju's hand all the way home. Holding Xiao Yunju's hand, Yun Jian had just stepped into the villa when she saw the tall figure sitting on the sofa. It was Si. She was stunned but still held Xiao Yunju's hand as they entered the house. "Jejie, are we staying here from now on?" Xiao Yunju turned to ask Yun Jian when Si looked over. "Yeah, Jejie will introduce Jejie's family to you." Yun Jian could not help caressing her younger brother's head with a wide smile. Si was already striding over with her long legs. He frowned slightly. Since Yun Jian came in with the little guy, she had not spared a glance at her. "Oh." Xiao Yunju pressed his lips together, his head bobbing up and down. He then looked around and asked Yun Jian, "Jejie, can I sleep with you tonight?" "Of course." "No." After Xiao Yunju asked, two voices sounded at the same time. Chapter 274. Yun Jian and Yunju were both stunned by Si Yi's words. Yun Jian in particular did not understand the meaning behind Si Yi's words. Yunju, on the other hand, shook his adorable little head from side to side. An 8-year-old child naturally did not understand that he had asked his older sister a question. Why was his older brother, who was so handsome, not allowing him to sleep with his older sister when his older sister had already agreed to it? Before either of them realized what was going on, Si Yi's tall and broad figure appeared in front of Yun Jian. He raised his good-looking eyebrows slightly and turned to look at Xiao Yunju. His short hair tilted to the side as he repeated his words in a mellow and pleasant voice. "You're not allowed to sleep with her." Yunju's arrival had been unexpected. Moreover, he had not helped Yunju clean up a clean room. However, Yunju wanted to sleep in the same room as Yun Jian. Even though Yunju was just a little kid, he would not allow it. Xiao Yunju frowned when he heard Si Yi's words. He looked at Si Yi in confusion and asked, "Big brother, why can't I sleep with my older sister?" The corners of Si Yi's lips quirked up, his handsome lips exuding a certain charm. He paused for a moment before he came up with a random excuse. "Because you're a boy." After that, he added, "You'll sleep in my room tonight." With that, Si Yi turned and went upstairs. No matter how much he explained, he didn't. "Ridiculous," Yun Jian said softly as she watched Si Yi go upstairs. She then reached out to rub her younger brother's head. "Little Zhu, you can sleep with big brother tonight." Yun Jian looked at her younger brother with a bright smile. "Okay." Yunju was a very obedient child. He quickly realized that he could not sleep in the same room as his older sister. However, big brother seemed very fierce just now. Forget it, he should listen to his sister. In the evening, when Qin Yiru and others went home, Yun Jian introduced Yunju's background to Qin Yiru. Of course, she would not tell Qin Yiru that Yunju was her younger brother in her previous life. She just made up a story, but it was close to the reality. She said that Yunju's mother was seriously injured and hospitalized. She felt sorry for Yunju, so she brought her home to raise her. Qin Yiru was kind-hearted, and since she started working at New Cruise, she had been saving more and more money. He could afford to raise another child. Moreover, Yunju was very likable. Qin Yiru soon fell in love with Xiao Yunju. He even kept calling her Xiao Zhu Xiao Zhu. Yun Jian handled the school transfer procedures for Yunju. The 8-year-old Yunju was already in primary 1. Now that he came back to Longmen City with her, Yun Jian quickly got someone to handle the school transfer procedures and enrolled him in school as usual. At the same time, Yun Jian went back to her normal school life. Since Zhang Xiaofeng and the others knew that Yun Jian was the director of New Cruise, they had been coming to her every day. Of course, Yun Jian did not forget to get Zhang Xiaofeng to train his body every day. In the blink of an eye, it had been almost 3 months since her rebirth. This Friday, Yun Jian went to Yun Yi's school to look for Yun Yi after school. She could not find her in the classroom. He went to the music classroom. It's New Year's Day soon. Your brother participated in a program during the New Year's Day performance this year. He's busy rehearsing in the music classroom now. A boy in the class who could tell that Yun Jian was Yun Yi's younger sister pointed the way for Yun Jian out of kindness. Chapter 275. The DE Senior High School that Yun Yi studied in was an elite school, but not everyone could enroll in it. And for such a public school with such a foundation, its education level was also very high. Here, not only could students enjoy the guidance of first-level education teachers, they could even choose their own interests and hobbies. These hobbies included a variety of musical instruments. Every student who studied here could choose a musical instrument they liked to practice. At the same time, there were teachers who specialized in musical instruments who taught the students how to play. Just as Yun Jian approached the music classroom, she heard the sounds of various musical instruments being played. The sound of all the instruments mixed together was like a cacophony of noise, extremely unpleasant to the ears. Now that she was closer, she could even see the young man standing in front of the classroom with his slender fingers strumming the guitar. He was as quiet and gentle as a clear spring. Her brother Yun Yi was a guitar student. He was very good at it. Yun Yi had come into contact with the guitar before he studied in this school. Yun Yi came into contact with the guitar because of his junior high school teacher. Yun Yi's junior high school teacher was a beautiful woman who loved to play the guitar. When Yun Yi became obsessed with the guitar, his junior high school teacher knew that Yun Yi liked it but could not afford a guitar to practice due to her family's financial situation, so she gave her guitar to Yun Yi. Yun Yi had been teaching himself to play the guitar and had not stopped since. Xiao Jian. Yun Yi noticed Yun Jian quickly. He kept his guitar and placed it aside before going to Yun Jian. Go. Yun Jian called out with squinted eyes and commented to Yun Yi, "You played well." It was indeed well done. Yun Yi chuckled in embarrassment and led Yun Jian into the music classroom. The music classroom was currently filled with the sound of various musical instruments being practiced diligently. It was very noisy. "Yun Yi, who's this cute little girl?" Just as Yun Jian was looking around, an unfriendly voice rang out. A pretty girl in a pretty pink dress with regular features stood in front of Yun Jian, looking at her maliciously with a hint of threat in her tone. At first glance, Yun Jian did not feel anything special about the girl. "She's my younger sister, Yun Jian." Yun Yi answered with a smile and introduced the girl to Yun Jian. "She's Qin Yubing, the main pianist for our New Year's Day performance." Yun Yi gave a simple introduction. Yun Jian, on the other hand, noticed it. The girl named Qin Yubing kept glancing at Yun Yi. The adoration in her eyes was clearly visible. Yun Jian also realized that Qin Yubing had a lot of opinions about her at first, but when Yun Yi said that she was his younger sister, Qin Yubing's expression changed again. "Wow, you're Yun Yi's younger sister." Qin Yubing shouted and glanced at Yun Yi. Then she walked over and pulled Yun Jian to the only piano in the music classroom as if she was an old friend. At the same time, Qin Yubing was still mumbling to herself, as if she was afraid that others would not know how good she was. "Little girl, is this your first time here? Do you want to learn how to play the piano? Although I'm not very good now, I'm only at the 9th grade of piano, but I can teach you how to play." Chapter 276. Although Yun Jian did not like Qin Yubing, she still followed her. She could feel that her brother only treated Qin Yubing as a classmate, but she could not deny the pride and arrogance in Qin Yubing's tone when she spoke to her. She was trying to curry favor with Yun Jian. The reason was simple. Yun Yi was her brother. "Come, sit here." Qin Yubing gestured for Yun Jian to sit on the stool in front of the only grand piano in the music room. Qin Yubing then stood aside and pressed a few keys on the piano. She lifted her thumb to press one of the keys and introduced it to Yun Jian. "Little girl, this key is due." As she spoke, Qin Yubing pressed a few more buttons and explained them to Yun Jian one by one. Yun Jian acted like she did not understand anything and nodded with a slight smile. Yun Yi was standing beside her. Yun Yi only smiled. His cheerful face was refreshing. It was undeniable that Yun Yi was very handsome. He was the kind of guy who looked clean. It was no wonder that Qin Yubing would raise her head to look at Yun Yi from time to time. The adoration in her eyes was obvious. Especially when Yun Yi looked at his sister sitting in front of the piano with a smile on her pretty face and her red lips curled up. He felt comforted. After all, in Yun Yi's heart, Qin Yiru had worked hard to raise the two of them until now. He felt that he could live a hard life, but he did not want his mother to suffer. Even more so, he did not want his sister to live at the bottom of society. In this era, not everyone could afford to learn the piano. Yun Yi had a huge wish in his heart. He hoped that he could work hard to get into a university and earn money to support his family after he graduated. Not only did he want to support his mother, but he also wanted his sister to live a good life. A good life where she could learn whatever she wanted. Of course, Yunyi did not know that Yun Jian was the chairman of New Cruise. Qin Yubing stood aside. She could feel that Yunyi had been watching her teach Yun Jian how to play the piano. Qin Yubing's heart was pounding. At the same time, Qin Yubing had an idea. She wanted to show off in front of Yunyi. "Little girl, can you stand up for a while? I'll play a song for you. Then I'll teach you." Qin Yubing tried her best to soften her voice as she spoke to Yun Jian. Yun Jian smirked and stood up. She wanted to see what tricks Qin Yubing was up to. When Qin Yubing caught Yunyi watching from the corner of her eye, she took over the latter's spot eagerly. Placing both hands on the piano, she played a smooth and coherent tune. This was the most fluent and coherent piece she had ever played. As the gentle music played, the surrounding students who were busy practicing their New Year's Day performances could not help but stop to listen to Qin Yubing's performance. They could not help but exclaim. Qin Yubing glanced at the praises from the corner of her eyes. She was immensely pleased with herself, but there was also a trace of pride. She was so outstanding. How could Yunyi not like her? The song ended. Qin Yubing gave up her seat and let Yun Jian sit in front of the piano again. She then spoke to Yun Jian gently. "Little girl, you can try to learn the song I played just now." There was an indescribable sense of pride in her words. Yun Jian nodded gently. She paused for a moment before her fair and slender fingers touched the piano. Then her hands suddenly became nimble. A song that everyone was familiar with flowed out from the piano under Yun Jian's fingers. It was indescribably beautiful. Wasn't this the song Qin Yubing played just now? Yun Yi's sister knew how to play too. Chapter 277. You know how to play this song? Just as everyone was flabbergasted and even Yunyi widened her eyes, Qin Yubing's astonished voice rang with a hint of surprise and embarrassment. She knew how to play. Yun Yi's younger sister knew how to play the piano. Qin Yubing's current shock and awkwardness were indescribable. She had been showing off in front of Yun Jian just now, but the latter had been mocking her all along. She did not tell her. Yun Jian did not tell her that she knew how to play the piano. Was he trying to embarrass her? For a moment, Qin Yubing's face gradually darkened. "Yeah, Xiao Jian, you know how to play the piano?" In contrast to Qin Yubing's shock, Yunyi was much calmer, but there was still a lot of shock and astonishment in that calmness. "Go, I learned this from Xiao Yan when I was in Xinjiang town." Yun Jian smiled. She was not lying. The original owner of the body had indeed gone to Lu Fian's house to learn piano from her for a while when she was in Xinjiang town. It was because Lu Fian came from a well-to-do family. Her parents were both teachers and she had learned piano from a teacher. The original owner of the body had also learned from Lu Fian for a period of time, but it was not very professional. Yun Jian smiled and said, "But it's my first time hearing this song. You played it so well the first time you heard it?" When everyone heard this, they were once again shocked. Qin Yubing, on the other hand, froze on the spot like she had been slapped hard. Yun Jian could play it so well after listening to it once? What was she then? She had almost scraped the skin off her hands to practice this song. Qin Yubing's face paled. Yunyi smiled in relief and placed his long fingers on Yun Jian's head to rub it gently. "I see." He still remembered that Lu Fian was his younger sister's best friend. Yun Jian nodded with a smile. "Right, go. Are you coming home today?" Yun Jian asked with a blink and changed the topic quickly. Qin Yubing was left out in the cold. I am." Yunyi thought about it and nodded. For the sake of a good learning environment, Yunyi had not been home for a few weeks. In spite of it, he was aware of the addition of Yun Zhu to the family and expressed his warm welcome. "Let's go to a restaurant today. Mom doesn't work overtime today." Treat it as a welcome party for Xiao Zhu, Yun Jian said with a smile. "Sure." Yunyi nodded and went to pack his things. "Xiao Jian, go. To go back with you to go home." From beginning to end, Yunyi did not spare Qin Yubing a second glance. On the other hand, Yun Jian and Yunyi were already out of the school gate. As they made their way to the main road, they saw someone coming toward them. The person had short hair and wore a short-sleeved t-shirt. He was drenched in sweat and looked like he had just come back from jogging. It was none other than Su Haokol, who had just come back from jogging. As the son of a mafia boss, Su Haokol had always had the habit of exercising. When Su Haokol saw Yun Jian, he told Yunyi with a smile, Your sister is here to pick you up from school. I'm so envious that you have such a great sister." Su Hao Cole even greeted Yun Jian as he spoke. Chapter 278. Yun Jian did not feel that Yun Yi's invitation was inappropriate. After all, Su Hao Cole was Yun Yi's best friend. Su Hao Cole had helped Yun Yi a lot when her family was poor. Yun Jian followed suit and said, "Yeah, let's go together. The more the merrier." Su Hao Cole grinned and said, "It's rare for little sister Yun Yi to invite me to a restaurant. If I don't go, I'll be disrespectful." "Ah, it's a deal. Let's meet at the usual place at 6 o'clock tonight," Yun Yi said with a smile. "Okay." Su Hao Cole nodded with a smile. Then Yun Yi and Su Hao Cole said goodbye for the time being. Yun Yi and Yun Jian went home at the same time. Qin Yiru had wanted to hold a welcome party for a long time. She even invited Dong Ruan and Si. Of course, on the surface, it was to hold a welcome party for Yunju. At the same time, it was also to thank Dong Ruan for taking her in during her most difficult time. As for the welcome party, it was not a grand ceremony. In fact, it was just a gathering of a group of people. Everyone gathered together for a meal and a chat. It was that simple. When Yun Jian got home, Qin Yiru had already prepared everything. Qin Yiru even specially bought a new set of clothes for Xiao Yunju, which added a lot of handsomeness to Yunju's small face. "Sister, brother?" When Xiao Yunju saw Yun Jian and Yun Yi, he could not help but run over with his short legs and happily twirl in front of Yun Yi and Yun Jian. Yun Jian squatted down and pinched Xiao Yunju's tender and smooth skin as she asked, "Little Zhu, have you been obedient in school recently?" "Little Zhu has been very obedient. The teacher even praised little Zhu today." Xiao Yunju puffed out his chest and showed his masculinity. Then Xiao Yunju suddenly remembered something. He reached into his trouser pocket and finally found something. It was a pack of Green Arrow chewing gum. "Sister, brother Ce came to school to pick little Zhu up today. Because little Zhu was praised by the teacher, brother Ce even bought little Zhu bubble gum. It's really delicious. Little Zhu even left 2 pieces for you and brother." As he spoke, Xiao Yunju reached out and took out the remaining 2 pieces of chewing gum from the pack and stuffed them into Yun Jian and Yun Yi's hands. Then Xiao Yunju looked at Yun Jian and Yun Yi with his pink and tender face. When she heard Xiao Yunju call Ce brother Ce, Yun Jian's mouth twitched. However, when she looked at the little guy in front of her who was bought over by Ce with a pack of chewing gum, she smiled helplessly. Then, under Xiao Yunju's expectant gaze, she tore open the pack of chewing gum and chewed it. Yun Yi did the same. However, when Yun Jian chewed the chewing gum, she saw Ce in a black casual outfit appear at the top of the stairs. He had both hands in his trouser pockets. His handsome face revealed a trace of laziness as he strode down the stairs with his long and slender legs. "Brother Ce." At this moment, the little guy who was standing in front of Yun Jian and watching her and Yun Yi chewing gum suddenly shouted excitedly. In the next second, Xiao Yunju ran over to Ce at the speed of a wisp of smoke and circled around him. Ce habitually reached out his fair and slender fingers and rubbed Xiao Yunju's hair. His beautiful starry eyes looked at Yun Jian with an irresistible tenderness. Chapter 279. Hearing Ce's sudden greeting, Yun Jian's red lips that were chewing gum paused and she almost swallowed it. "It's from Xiao Zhu, of course it's delicious," Yun Jian said with a smile as she looked at Xiao Yunju who was surrounding Ce from afar. "Hihi Jejia, this is Ce Gija's reward for Xiao Zhu." Xiao Yunju popped out from Ce's side and looked at Yun Jian with a grin. His nimble behavior was as adorable as it could get. Yun Jian smiled and looked at Ce gratefully. She owed her younger brother in her past life. She was grateful from the bottom of her heart that Ce could treat him so well and make Xiao Zhu so happy. "Are you all ready?" It was then that Qin Yiru hooked her arm around Dong Ruan's and both of them walked down the stairs intimately. Qin Yiru, who had just gone upstairs for a while, had put on a new fur coat. It was a brand new one that Dong Ruan had chosen for her. It accentuated her complexion when she wore it. Now that Qin Yiru had saved some money, other than her daily expenses, Qin Yiru no longer had to wear the old clothes that she had mended. Since she was happy, she steeled her heart and bought a fur coat as well. Of course, Qin Yiru had also bought clothes for Yun Jian and Yun Yi before that. We can go now." Yun Jian narrowed her eyes, her delicate and pretty face looking even more alluring. She went over to hold Xiao Yunju's hand and walked out of the house with Qin Yiru and the rest. The group of people walked over. Qin Yiru planned to treat everyone to a good meal this time, so she chose a 4-star hotel in Longmen City, Qingyun Hotel. She only invited Dong Ruan and her family. Although this hotel's expenses were relatively high, she could still afford a meal if she gritted her teeth and took out a few months' worth of her salary. This Qingyun Hotel was the old place that Yun Yi and Su Hao Cole had mentioned. Back then, when Su Hao Cole was being hunted down by a sniper, Yun Jian managed to kill the sniper instead. When they arrived at the entrance of Qingyun Hotel, they saw that Su Hao Cole was already standing there waiting for them. When Su Hao Cole saw Qin Yiru and Dong Ruan, she smiled and greeted them, "Hello, aunties." Su Hao Cole had met Qin Yiru before. After all, he was Yun Yi's best friend and they used to be friends. "Oh, it's Xiaozhe. Long time no see." Qin Yiru greeted him cheerfully as well. Su Hao Cole went up to Yun Yi after greeting her. He even turned to greet Yun Jian with a teasing tone, "Hi Yun Yi, Mimi, we meet again. Is it inconvenient for us to sit down and chat later?" Just as he finished his flirting, Su Hao Cole felt the air around them turn colder. He turned to look and saw the handsome man standing beside Yun Jian looking at him with a penetrating gaze. That gaze seemed to want to kill him. Su Hao Cole could not help shuddering. "Aha. I think I'll sit with you later." Su Hao Cole rubbed his nose and smiled awkwardly. Yun Jian pursed her lips. She watched as Qin Yiru and Dong Ruan walked into the hotel arm in arm. Yun Yi and Su Hao Cole followed them in. She stood in the same spot and held Xiao Yunju's hand. Suddenly she bent down and whispered into Xiao Yunju's ear, "Xiao Zhu, kick him." Yi was standing beside Xiao Yunju. At this moment Xiao Yunju was sandwiched between the two of them. When Xiao Yunju heard Yun Jian's words, he suddenly raised his beautiful eyes and asked Yun Jian loudly and ignorantly, "Sister, why do you want me to kick Ce Gij?" Chapter 280. Yun Jian didn't think that Xiao Yunju would actually say what she secretly said to him out loud. She immediately covered Xiao Yunju's mouth and pulled Xiao Yunju towards the hotel. No, Xiao Zhu, you heard wrong," Yun Jian said as she stroked her brother's short hair. Looking at the blush that flashed across Yun Jian's rosy cheeks, Ce pressed his lips together and flashed a charming smile before following Yun Jian into the hotel in large strides. He followed Yun Jian's footsteps. Qin Yiru had already reserved a table. After they sat down, the dishes were served. Naturally, they didn't sit in a private room. They sat in the large living room on the first floor. The private room was much more expensive than the large living room. After all, Clear Rhythm Hotel was a 4-star hotel. The only place Qin Yiru could afford was the large living room on the first floor. The dishes were served one after another. Yun Jian picked up a large drumstick for Xiao Yunju. Xiao Yunju was scarily skinny. He probably didn't have many good meals because he lived with Yun Hailan for the past 6 months. After all, Yun Hailan's family was even worse off than Yun Jian's when she had just been reborn. "Xiao Zhu, eat more." Yun Jian placed a large piece of drumstick into Xiao Yunju's bowl. Who knew that the moment the drumstick was placed in Xiao Yunju's bowl, Xiao Yunju would shake his little head. He used his chopsticks to pick up the drumstick and placed it in Ciyi's bowl. At the same time, Xiao Yunju pouted and said with his pink lips, "Xiao Zhu doesn't like drumsticks. I want to give them to Ce Gij." Yun Jian had a huge question mark in her heart. When did Xiao Zhu become so clingy to Ce? How could she, as his older sister, not know? "Xiao Zhu, if you don't like drumsticks, don't put them in Ce Gij's bowl. It's impolite," Yun Jian said as she stroked Yun Zhu's smooth short hair. Besides, she used her chopsticks to pick up the drumstick. Ce wouldn't eat it, right? However, just as Yun Jian finished lecturing Xiao Yunju, Ce picked up the drumstick from his bowl and gently swallowed it. Yun Jian swallowed and was speechless. But Ce Gij said that if Xiao Zhu doesn't like it, I should give it to Ce Gij because I can't waste food. Xiao Zhu blinked his eyes and looked at Yun Jian innocently. Yun Jian retorted at Yun Zhu's words. How dare he instigate Xiao Yunju like this? Yun Jian suddenly turned her head and glared at Ce. She looked just like a wife complaining about her husband. Ce pursed his lips and gave her a handsome smile. Seeing Ce's handsome smile, Yun Jian's heart suddenly stopped. She quickly lowered her head and quickly swallowed the food in her bowl. As for Yun Jian and Ce's actions, no one noticed them. Su Hao Cole was busy chatting with Yun Yi. Qin Yiru and Dong Ruan were also happily chatting. Only Xiao Yunju, who was sandwiched between Yun Jian and Ce, raised his head and looked around. What were Big Sister and Ce Gij doing? "Oh, you guys are also here for dinner? What a coincidence." At this moment, a familiar female voice called out from behind Yun Jian. Yun Jian turned her head and saw Chen Yubing, who had changed into a glazed dress and braided her hair. She smiled and greeted them as she walked over. "It's her?" Yun Jian frowned. Chen Yubing walked over and sized up Yun Yi. Then, she used a familiar voice to speak to Qin Yiru. Chapter 281. In fact, it was not a coincidence. Chen Yubing had overheard the conversation between Yun Jian and Yun Yi in the music room. In addition, one of Chen Yubing's friends overheard Yun Yi and Su Haokol saying, "See you at the usual place at the school gate." Weren't these the usual places that Yun Yi and Su Haokol frequented? Chen Yubing had always been secretly in love with Yun Yi. How could she not know? Thus she came here. Of course, she deliberately redressed herself before coming here because it was very likely that she would meet Yun Yi's mother today. However, it turned out that she really did meet Yun Yi's mother, Qin Yiru. Thus, she quickly came over to greet her. "Oh, so you're Yun Yi's classmate? Hello, hello." Qin Yiru quickly stood up and greeted Chen Yubing when she heard that Chen Yubing was Yun Yi's classmate. Qin Yiru had always been friendly to her son and daughter's friends. This was normal. At this time, Yun Yi, who was sitting at the side, frowned silently. "By the way, classmate, have you eaten? Do you want to sit down and have dinner with us?" Qin Yiru did not find anything wrong. Instead, she asked Chen Yubing very kindly. "This, auntie, won't it be embarrassing?" Chen Yubing looked around and then showed an embarrassed expression. However, she still sat down at a seat not far from Yun Yi. In fact, Qin Yiru did not really intend to let Chen Yubing sit down. She was just being polite. However, when she saw that Chen Yubing really sat down, Qin Yiru could only go along with it. Qin Yiru smiled and said politely, No, since you are Yi's classmate, you can be more casual." Yun Jian did not expect Chen Yubing to be so shameless. She turned her head and saw her brother frowning. His frown was so tight that it could kill a fly. Then, with Chen Yubing's self-conscious participation, the atmosphere became less cheerful. Yun Jian could even feel Chen Yubing's eyes darting towards Si Yi's face from time to time after she sat down. Yun Jian immediately felt that this feeling was very unpleasant. In fact, Yun Jian's intuition was right. It was only after Chen Yubing sat down that she saw Si Yi. His perfect face was like a work of art carved by God. Anyone who sat beside him would pale in comparison. In spite of it, Chen Yubing only took a few more glances at him. She knew herself well enough to know that a man like that would never belong to her, so she shifted her attention back to Yun Yi. Even after Chen Yubing joined in, everyone picked up their bowls and ate their own food, not saying a word. The atmosphere was even more subtle. After dinner, Chen Yubing shamelessly followed them all the way out of Qingyun Hotel. Chen Yubing even trailed behind Qin Yiru like she was trying to curry favor with Qin Yiru. She could not help finding topics to flatter the latter. "Auntie, it's rare for us to get together. Why don't we go shopping together? I saw that the newly opened Pacific department store has a lot of new clothes that will fit you perfectly. Why don't we go take a look?" However, Chen Yubing thought in her heart, which woman doesn't like to be beautiful? She first took care of Yun Yi's mother. She was not afraid that Yun Yi would not be moved by her. Well, Qin Yiru frowned and glanced at Chen Yubing awkwardly. Qin Yiru had indeed heard about the newly opened department store in Longmen City called Pacific Department Store. Women love to be beautiful and Qin Yiru was no exception. However, Chen Yubing had taken this into account but not the other one. The rent at Pacific Department Store was expensive, causing the merchants to raise their prices several times. Even the cheapest adult clothes cost a few hundred to 1,000 each. The quality and design of the clothes were naturally excellent. However, treating everyone to a meal today had cost Qin Yiru so much and now Chen Yubing was suggesting to pick out such an expensive piece of clothing for her? How could she afford to go? "My mom has something on tonight. She can't go." Just as Qin Yiru was frowning, Yun Jian spoke to Chen Yubing without much anger in her tone. Chapter 282. Yes. Miss Chen Yubing, I'm sorry we have something on tonight. I'm afraid we can't go shopping with you. Qin Yiru was smart enough to know that Yun Jian was helping her out, so she spoke up. "Chen Yubing, you should go. It's time to go home and practice your zither." Yun Yi, who had been silent, could not help telling Chen Yubing. His words carried a strong sense of urgency and impatience. Chen Yubing, who was instantly isolated, bit her lip and left under Yun Yi's impatient gaze, leaving behind a reluctant statement. "Then I'll go first. See you in school, Senior Yun Yi." Chen Yubing's tone sounded like she was unwilling to let go. Yun Jian's brows furrowed tightly. She would never let a woman like her get close to her brother again. Due to Chen Yubing's appearance, the group's cheerful mood was mostly dampened, but Qin Yiru and Dong Ruan were still smiling along the way. Yun Jian did not know that Chen Yubing was unwilling to give up. Of course, it was her unwillingness that led to Chen Yubing's tragic end. Of course, this was a story for another time. Ce left Longmen City temporarily due to some matters. Yun Jian did not see him for the next few days. Yun Jian went back to her usual life as well. New Cruise was on the right track now. Although the sales volume was not as shocking as when the auto show was first held, the net profit of tens of millions a month was stable. Zhang Jifan and his buddies were overjoyed. They had never thought that their decision to start a business with Yun Jian back then would be so much more profitable than when they were loan sharks. More importantly, their current jobs were honorable. This was especially true for Zhang Jifan. Whenever he walked out into the crowd, people would point at him and exclaim, "Look, that's the big boss of New Cruise." Yun Jian's monthly income was in the millions and even tens of millions. It was her privilege as the director of New Cruise. At this time, there were only a few days left before the New Year's Day performance. It was only about a week away. The students who were rehearsing for the New Year's Day performance were all busy. Yun Jian, who did not sign up for the performance, seemed to be very free. Yun Jian's Dragon Gate No. 1 High School and Yun Yi's First High School jointly organized the New Year's cultural performance. As the former was the best junior high school in Longmen City while the latter was the best senior high school in Longmen City, both schools had reached a consensus. Every year, during the New Year's Day performance, the two schools would each come up with 15 performances, for a total of 30 performances. After that, all the students from the two schools would gather together to watch. Finally, they would evaluate which school students performed better and so on. Of course, this was also to increase the interest of the students. It was not yet time for the New Year's cultural performance, but the students were already restless. After school this Friday, Yun Jian, Zhang Xiaofeng, and Zhang Jifan went out with the crowd. Just as the four of them reached the school gate, Yun Jian was stopped by a tall and bashful boy whose cheeks were flushed. He looked rather shy. "Hey Yun Jian," the boy called out to Yun Jian softly, but his voice was soon drowned out by the hustle and bustle of the crowd. In spite of it, Yun Jian still heard it with her sharp ears. She turned to see Lu Haozi standing on a high flight of stairs, calling out to her in a low mosquito-like voice. Chapter 283. When Yun Jian walked over, Zhang Xiaofeng and the rest followed. Zhang Xiaofeng, Qin Xini, and Ling Yichen had seen Lu Haozi before, so they were not unfamiliar with him. "You guys go ahead first." Yun Jian turned to look at Zhang Xiaofeng and the rest and reminded them. Zhang Xiaofeng and the rest would go to New Cruise to report to Zhang Jifan whenever they were not studying on the weekends. The three of them were determined to learn from Zhang Jifan. At the same time, they wanted to make a name for themselves in the business world. "Will go ahead first then." Zhang Xiaofeng nodded at Yun Jian and left with Qin Xini and Ling Yichen. Yun Jian turned to look at Lu Haozi. She narrowed her eyes and said, "Let's find a quiet place to talk." Yun Jian and Lu Haozi found a quiet place and looked at each other. Lu Haozi's cheeks flushed as Yun Jian stared at him. He looked like an adorable little brother. He dared not look into Yun Jian's eyes. Instead, he lowered his head and looked at Yun Jian. "Our elder is back. I told him that you're looking for him, so he asked me to tell you when you're free to meet him." Lu Haozi said all this in one breath. At this time, his face was as red as an apple. "I'm free now." Yun Jian moved her red lips and smiled. Therefore, Lu Haozi brought Yun Jian to his house to meet his elder. Yun Jian followed Lu Haozi back to the school gate. They took bus route 11 from the school gate to the east station and then took the rural bus. It was a bumpy ride of about 1.5 hours before they arrived at Lu Haozi's house. Lu Haozi's house was located in a small town. It was quite far from Xinjiang town, almost one in the east and one in the west. Lu Haozi's family lived in a courtyard house. Lu Haozi's family wasn't the only one living in this courtyard house. Their direct family members, side branches, and even the family elders were all living here. The Lu family was an ancient family, and could be considered a hidden family now. At the same time, all the relatives lived in the same house and had never been separated. When Yun Jian and Lu Haozi walked into the courtyard, an old lady sitting in the courtyard and enjoying the evening breeze saw them and shouted, "Xiao Zhe brought back a girl this time. That was incredible. She can't be Xiao Zhe's little girlfriend, right? She looks so beautiful." The old lady's nonsensical words made Lu Haozi's cheeks burn even hotter, and even his earlobes turned red. Lu Haozi hurriedly replied to the old lady, "Grandma, don't talk nonsense. This is my friend Yun Jian. She's here to see the elders." "Oh, so that's how it is. I thought you were enlightened." The old lady came to a sudden realization. She smiled as she watched Lu Haozi lead Yun Jian into the house. This was just my grandma talking nonsense. Please don't take offense." Lu Haozi said to Yun Jian in a fluster. "It's fine." Yun Jian narrowed her eyes and smiled. "Haha, Xiao Zhe, you brought her here so quickly?" At that moment, A strong male voice was heard. An old man in his 60s or 70s walked in with a smile. "Elder." Lu Haoze called out when he saw the old man. Elder Lu waved his hand to signal for him to be quiet. Elder Lu then walked around Yunjian twice. He said to her, "So you're his disciple." "Tsk, I didn't think that old man would accept a disciple." When Yunjian heard Elder Lu's tone, she instantly believed that he knew the old man who had taught her many skills in her previous life. She couldn't wait to ask Elder Lu, "You know him? Then do you know where he is now?" Elder Lu laughed heartily at first, but then he suddenly stopped laughing. His expression suddenly became serious. He did not say anything but only spat out 2 words, "Yulong mainland." When Elder Lu spat out these 4 words, Yunjian's eyelids twitched. Chapter 284. After Elder Lu finished speaking, he returned to his original cheerful self. He really was a spirited old man. "Haha, little girl, sit down and have a cup of tea first. There's no rush." Elder Lu stroked his beard that he had deliberately kept, smiling as he pointed to a high stool for Yunjian to sit down. "Okay." Yunjian naturally knew that these things could not be explained in a few sentences. She quickly sat down on the high stool as Elder Lu said. Lu Haoze stood obediently at the side like a well-behaved child. He brewed a pot of tea for Yunjian, poured it into a cup and handed it to Yunjian. "Thank you," Yunjian said softly to Lu Haoze with pursed lips. Lu Haoze, however, walked shyly behind Elder Lu. "Hey little girl, since you're that stinky old man's disciple, then ask whatever you want to know. As long as I know, I'll tell you." Elder Lu sat down opposite Yunjian, stroking his beard as he spoke. Yunjian could tell from Elder Lu's words that Elder Lu had a great relationship with her previous life's master. She was not in a hurry to ask. Instead, she rubbed the teacup gently with her fingertips, remaining silent for a while. Then even Elder Lu could not help but marvel at how a little girl like her could be so calm. Yunjian suddenly raised her head and gave Elder Lu a slight smile. "You're also from the Yulong continent." Elder Lu's hand that was stroking his beard froze. He did not expect that this little girl was not asking him a question, but Yunjian's words were not a question but an affirmation. "You little girl? How did you know?" Elder Lu stroked his chest and stood up in surprise. "That's none of your business." Yunjian smiled and stood up with Elder Lu. After a moment of silence she continued, "Elder Lu, if I'm not wrong, it's not just you. Everyone in the Lu family is from the Yulong continent." Even Lu Haoze, who was standing at the side, was dumbfounded. Lu Haoze had never heard of the Yulong continent, but he could tell that this non-existent continent was definitely not on Earth. "Elder?" Lu Haoze couldn't help but ask Elder Lu. His tone was filled with doubt and disbelief. Elder Lu, on the other hand, acted as if he had been seen through. He stopped pretending and muttered, "That's right. I and even the entire Lu family migrated from the Yulong continent." Elder Lu was silent for 2 seconds before continuing, "But now that I think about it, it has been many years since I moved here with the Lu family. This old man and your master have not seen each other for over 20 years. But I can guarantee that if you can't find that old man in this world, he must have returned to Yulong mainland. As for the other matters of the Yulong continent, it's not convenient for me to talk about them. Little girl, if you're fated, go and find out for yourself." The last few sentences were said with a deep sigh. After Elder Lu finished speaking, he stroked his long beard and walked away with a sigh. Yunjian didn't ask her to stay. She didn't come in vain. At least she knew where her master had gone in her previous life. Yulong mainland. It turned out that she had accidentally entered another world in the ancient tombstone cave. To be honest, Yunjian heaved a sigh of relief when she found out where her master had gone. But at least she had a direction now. She knew where her master had gone. It was no wonder that she couldn't find her master's whereabouts even after mobilizing all her forces in her previous life. Chapter 285. It was already very late when they returned from Lu Haoze's house. Yunjian did not go to the military training camp today, so she fell asleep the moment she got home. Nothing special happened in the next few days. 7 days later, the annual New Year's Day performance that the students had been looking forward to officially began. Early in the morning, Chin Sini screamed excitedly. Chin Sini was participating in the performance at night. Her performance was singing. Chin Sini had a good voice and the songs she sang were very pleasant to listen to. However, as usual, the New Year's Day performance was held at night, but Chin Sini was already excited and nervous early in the morning. "Stop howling. Hurry up and prepare your song." Hee hee. Zhang Xiaofeng pushed away Qin Sini's head that was circling around Yun Jian and leaned over. Master, I've already practiced the chopstick throwing you taught me last time. When are you free? I'll show you. Zhang Xiaofeng said to Yun Jian excitedly. Yun Jian nodded and narrowed her eyes. The New Year's Day performance was held at night, so the students were in class during the day. Because Longmen First High School and First High School were holding the New Year's Day performance together, the venue was Yun Yi's school. As Qin Sini was participating in the performance, she went to prepare in the afternoon. Because she had to put on makeup and change into her stage costume, she went early. In the evening, Yun Jian followed the school's organization and walked to First High School with her classmates. At this time, the New Year's Day performance had not started yet. Therefore, the students could take a look around First High School. Yun Jian went to the dressing room of the students participating in the performance. She went to the dressing room to look for her brother, Yun Yi. When she entered the dressing room with light steps, she could not help frowning when she scanned the room and did not see her brother, Yun Yi. Brother was not here? Under normal circumstances, it was impossible for Yun Yi to not be here. After all, it was almost time for the opening of the New Year's literary performance. And Yun Jian knew that Yun Yi's program was ranked very high. Jian. A silhouette dashed into the dressing room in a hurry. Qin Sini, who was halfway done with her makeup, sprinted in and grabbed Yun Jian's hand, telling her in a breathless voice, Yun Jian, I'm not going to let you go. Jian, I saw your brother being dragged out by a bunch of gangsters just now. I think it's because of a girl. She said she's going to beat him up. Go take a look. Qin Sini took a few deep breaths. She was still putting on her makeup when a group of people suddenly rushed in from the door and directly grabbed a boy who was bullying her. Taking a closer look, she realized that the boy was her Jian's brother. Listening to the gangsters' insults, they seemed to have taken him away because of a girl. Qin Sini was only halfway done with her makeup when she stopped and ran out to look for Yun Jian. It was only after a round of searching that she sprinted back when she heard that Jian was heading to the dressing room. Those who came to look for trouble on the eve of the New Year's literary performance were definitely up to no good. Yun Jian's brows scrunched up at that. Chapter 286. Where? Yun Jian ran out with Qin Sini. Over there. I saw them go that way. Qin Sini didn't even have time to catch her breath as she hurriedly led Yun Jian out. First High School, large field. Because the New Year's Day performance was about to begin, there was almost no one in the field. Even the teachers were busy at the front desk of the New Year's Day performance, so it became a good place to fight. At the same time, Yun Yi was being pinned down by a group of gangsters who outnumbered him. Yun Yi's handsome face didn't have a trace of fear. A blonde with dyed blonde hair who stood in front of Yun Yi was pointing at his nose and scolding him, Hey! Do you know who I am? How dare you fight with me over a woman? Qin Yubing is the woman I like, how dare you fight with me over her? The blonde-haired guy cursed fiercely. His saliva almost sprayed onto Yun Yi's handsome face. Yun Yi only sneered and was too lazy to explain. He fought with the blonde-haired guy over Qin Yubing? Are you kidding me? Alright, you're still laughing. The blonde-haired guy's small eyes narrowed into slits. He clenched his fist and was about to hit Yun Yi. Don't. Brother Huang, stop. At this moment, a soft and delicate voice cut in from the gap. Qin Yubing was seen swaying her long hair. She frowned and ran over with a trace of anxiety on her face. Brother Huang, don't hit Yun Yi Sr. Don't fight for me, don't. Qin Yubing revealed a scared and worried expression. Qin Yubing's words made it seem like she really had something to do with Yun Yi. When the blonde-haired guy heard this, he became even angrier. He looked at Qin Yubing and said to her in a gentle tone, Bing, just watch. I'll let this guy know the price of fighting with me over you. This is a contest between us men. Qin Yubing's words earlier had completely reversed the black and white facts. He even made the blonde think that Qin Yubing was innocent and that Yun Yi was the one who wanted to snatch Qin Yubing away from him. With that, the blonde raised his leg and kicked at Yun Yi's abdomen, who was being held down by his brothers. Just as the yellow-haired man lifted his leg to kick Yun Yi, a fist-sized rock flew towards the yellow-haired man's raised leg. Coincidentally, at the same time, the rock smashed into the yellow-haired man's acupoint at an astonishing speed. Brr! A heart-wrenching pain came from his leg. The yellow-haired man retracted his leg that was about to kick out. He was in so much pain that he knelt on the ground. On the other side, Yun Jian and Qin Sini, who had thrown the large stone, had already walked over. You want to hit my brother? Have you asked for my permission? Yun Jian let out a breath, and a cold and sharp gaze swept through the entire audience. Xiaojian. When Yun Yi saw his younger sister, he was reminded of his sister's skills and flashed a radiant smile. F*CKU, how dare you throw a rock at me? Little girl, you've got guts. Do you know who I am? The yellow-haired man wailed as he sat on the ground. Before the yellow-haired man could finish his shriek, his head was hit by a pair of broken shoes. In the blink of an eye, Yun Jian had taken down the yellow-haired man's brothers. She even kicked one of the men's shoes away, hitting the man's face directly. Then Yun Jian's casual warning rang, I don't know who you are, but remember, if there's a next time, I'll stab this knife in my hand into your heart. As she spoke, Yun Jian was already toying with the butterfly knife that had appeared out of nowhere like magic. King dare? The yellow-haired man felt like his dignity as a man was being trampled on after being hit by a pair of smelly shoes and being threatened, so he hollered loudly. Let's see if I dare to. Yun Jian raised her voice and flung the butterfly knife in her hand out right after she said that. The yellow-haired man and his men shuddered, because they saw the butterfly knife that had been thrown out by Yun Jian had already stabbed into Qin Yubing's braids after she spoke. It was so close that the butterfly knife would not have pierced Qin Yubing's hair but her head instead. A group of criminals appeared in a factory not far from the school, and they even planted a time bomb there. It's said to be the latest type of bomb and it's very powerful. If the bomb explodes, this place will be razed to the ground. Chapter 288. The teacher hollered. Due to the urgency of the situation, he did not even have the time to catch his breath. In spite of it, the teacher was quite considerate. If he had met someone who only cared about himself, he would probably have run away the moment he learned of the danger. He would not have risked his life to come here and inform the students to evacuate. What? There's a bomb buried nearby? Are we going to die? Sob, I don't want to die. Run. Just as the teacher was done, the students present became agitated. There was only one expression on everyone's face: fear, panic, and terror. For a moment, the scene was extremely chaotic. Everyone ran towards the exit. Students, don't be agitated. Don't panic. Please leave in an orderly manner. Faced with such a sudden situation, there were still teachers who stood up and pretended to be calm to host the event. Although the New Year's Day performance had yet to end, who would have the time to pay attention to this when their lives were threatened? Although there were teachers helping the students to evacuate in an orderly manner, there were still some who were so scared that they could not even move their legs. One such example was Qin Yubing, who had just returned. Qin Yubing was so scared that she could not even move her legs. In the past, she would definitely pester Yun Yi whenever something like this happened. However, when Qin Yubing turned her gaze to Yun Yi out of habit, she saw that Yun Jian had already gone to Yun Yi's side before her. Yun Jian was not in a hurry to leave. Instead, she went to her elder brother Yun Yi and told him, you go first. With that, Yun Jian turned to walk to the factory where the time bomb was buried. Yun Yi's brows knitted tightly as he grabbed his sister's arm and questioned, Xiao Jian, what are you going to do? Good, don't bother. Don't worry about it, you go first. There's only 10 minutes left before the time bomb explodes. If we don't deactivate the device after that, this place will be razed to the ground, Yun Jian told Yun Yi with a look up. What about you? Yun Yi knew that there was a time bomb in the factory, but his sister still went there. Naturally, he couldn't just stand by and watch. He raised his voice and shouted. Just as Yun Jian was about to speak again, Zhang Xiaofeng's loud shout came from the side. Master, why haven't you left yet? Let's go. At such a dangerous moment, all the students were busy running for their lives. Everyone wanted to leave as soon as possible. Yun Jian turned her head and saw Zhang Xiaofeng and the other two looking at her anxiously. She would be lying if she said she wasn't touched. However, at least Zhang Xiaofeng, Qin Sini, and Ling Yichen were not in a hurry to escape with the crowd at such a dangerous moment. Instead, they ran back to ask her to escape with them. You guys go first. Yun Jian repeated. She didn't leave because Gu Junjian had already sent a text message to all the Special Forces members about the time bomb in the factory. There were only 10 minutes left before the time bomb would detonate. Coincidentally, the time bomb in the factory was a new type of bomb invented by Kosha mercenaries, the AK-4. Other than the higher-ups of Kosha mercenaries, the bomb disposal experts here probably had no idea how to deactivate this new type of bomb. Initially, Yun Jian could ignore it. Although she was now an official member of the Special Forces, she could ignore such matters to a certain extent. However, why was the Kosha mercenaries' AK-4 time bomb here? When the police officer saw that Yun Jian wanted to force her way in, he stood up to stop her. There was a hint of impatience in his tone. This time, Yun Jian didn't continue to waste time with the police officer. She stood on the spot and somersaulted over the police officer's head. She even crossed the security line. After landing, she ran into the factory under the police officer's shocked gaze. The police officer didn't even have time to stop her. Inside the factory, a cylindrical time bomb was installed in the center of the factory. The stopwatch on the bomb was counting down at the speed of light. This time bomb was surrounded by several bomb disposal experts. At this time, the bomb disposal experts' foreheads were covered in cold sweat. The internal structure of the time bomb was much more complicated than they had imagined. They had never seen such a bomb before. Just as the bomb disposal experts were about to give up on contacting the device and let the last batch of people make the final preparations and retreat out of the bomb's range. Chapter 290. Such a confident, tender, and beautiful young girl's voice was heard. All the bomb disposal experts, including the police and special forces who were waiting for the bomb disposal experts' results, all looked towards the door. They saw a 15 or 16-year-old girl with fair skin, beautiful features, and a hint of playfulness and beauty appear in everyone's eyes. It had to be said that Yun Jian's appearance was indeed shocking. Even if she was placed in a group of beauties, she would still be easily distinguishable. Where did this little girl come from? Hurry up and chase her out. Where is this place and what's the situation? How dare they let a troublemaker in here? The experts need to think calmly before they can properly deactivate the device. Hurry up and chase this little girl out. Standing at the very front, a special police officer with a face full of stubble, who wasn't tall but was wearing a police uniform, pointed at Yun Jian and shouted. Without a doubt, this special police officer was the superior of the surrounding police and special forces. Of course, the words that Yun Jian just said, coupled with her age, would only make the people present think that she was here to cause trouble. This wasn't something that couldn't be understood. Yun Jian ignored the special police officer's call and walked straight towards the time bomb. What is she doing? Hurry up and catch her. Don't let this little girl touch the bomb. This bomb is very powerful. If it accidentally explodes, all of us will die. The special police officer with a face full of stubble saw Yun Jian walking towards the bomb and he quickly shouted in fear. The power of this bomb was very strong. The power of the gunpowder inside was different from normal bombs. Once this bomb detonated, it would definitely affect everything within a 1-kilometer radius and cause a lot of damage. It's going to be too late. Yun Jian saw the countdown timer on the time bomb and suddenly said. The group of special police officers who were ordered to surround Yun Jian and try to drag Yun Jian out of here all stopped in their tracks. What was this girl talking about? The bomb will detonate in 5 minutes and 35 seconds. Do you think that just a few of you who have never touched the latest AK-4 bomb can defuse it? Then you're underestimating its power too much. Also, once this bomb explodes, it will cause huge damage within 2 kilometers. Which one of you thinks you can run 2 kilometers in the last 5 minutes? Yun Jian's words rang an alarm bell in everyone's head. It was too late to retreat now. At this moment, the experts surrounding the time bomb broke out in cold sweat. It wasn't as if they didn't know that it would be difficult for them to defuse the bomb with their abilities. But who were they? An expert? It was precisely this little bit of vanity that caused them to delay again and again. They wanted to defuse the bomb, so they didn't announce that they couldn't defuse the bomb and told everyone to retreat. Especially now that a little girl had appeared and said in front of everyone that they couldn't defuse the bomb. The bomb disposal experts were instantly enraged. One of the bomb disposal experts held his breath and roared at Yun Jian, "Little girl, if you can dismantle it, then do it." These words were exactly what Yun Jian wanted. She lifted her feet and walked over lightly. "No. We are experts. Something that even we can't do, how can a little girl like her do it? Let's hurry up and retreat." One of the bomb disposal experts continued to shout. However, before this person finished shouting, Yun Jian had already arrived in front of the time bomb. This AK-4 time bomb was developed by one of the leaders of the Kosha mercenaries, Tiger Leopard. Tiger Leopard was her other expert besides Snake. Lizard. After this AK-4 time bomb was developed, no bomb disposal experts were able to defuse it. However, how could she not know what Tiger Leopard had developed? Who would know that this AK-4 time bomb was hailed as the most difficult to defuse in the newest model? She, Yun Jian, had easily deactivated the device within 10 seconds of the countdown. Chapter 291. If you don't want to die, then get out of my way. Yun Jian's eyes suddenly sharpened. She raised her voice and shouted. That pair of deep eyes seemed to have the power to shock people. The experts who stopped Yun Jian from defusing the bomb were stunned. No one would have thought that such an innocent little girl would suddenly shout in protest. There's no time left. If you continue to delay, then fine, we might as well die now. Yun Jian suddenly stretched out her hand and a butterfly knife appeared between her fair and slender fingers. As she spoke, she was about to use the knife to touch the time bomb that was still in the countdown. Everyone present raised their voices. No one thought that Yun Jian would make such a move. She actually dared to threaten them. One must know that time bombs were the most difficult to defuse. If they were careless, it was very likely that it would explode in advance. No. Stop. We agree. Facing Yun Jian's close threat, even the experts who refused and mocked Yun Jian for being a little girl couldn't help but shout out. There was no one present who wasn't afraid of death. Everyone was afraid of death. But in the face of immediate death or putting their lives in the hands of a little girl who might still have hope, everyone wisely chose the latter. Moreover, there was no better way now. A group of bomb defusing experts who cared about their reputation had already delayed the final evacuation time for the sake of their so-called reputation. When Yun Jian heard this, she casually put away the butterfly knife and then walked to the time bomb. The countdown timer on the time bomb was still rapidly changing. Now it showed, in other words, there were only 3 minutes left before the bomb would explode. To her, 3 minutes was enough for her to sit down and drink a cup of water to moisten her throat. It was enough time to defuse the time bomb. Because this AK-4 time bomb was from her kosher mercenaries. If she wasn't familiar with it, who else would defuse it? However, when Yun Jian reached out to defuse the bomb, everyone's hearts tightened fiercely. However, the girl's petite body leaned forward. She reached out and deftly removed the detonator with her fingers. At this moment, exposed in front of everyone were several red, yellow, and blue detonator wires. All bomb disposal experts knew how to remove the detonator that Yun Jian had done earlier. However, the next step was the hardest to choose in the process of defusing the bomb. There were so many red, yellow, and blue detonators mixed together. Choosing the right one to cut was like winning the lottery. If he didn't cut it, the bomb wouldn't be deactivated. If he had to cut it, which one should he cut? The reason why the bomb disposal experts didn't do anything was because they didn't know what the internal detonator of the AK-4 time bomb was like. If he reached out and cut the wrong time, the time bomb would automatically explode. If he cut it on the spot, it would cause a direct explosion due to the short circuit of the detonator. Therefore, this was a very difficult choice. Success or failure, whether or not this time bomb could be removed, all depended on this cut. As everyone held their breaths, they saw that Yun Jian had already picked up a pair of scissors. She hooked the yellow detonator wire from the innermost part and reached out to cut it. Wait, that wire is definitely not the correct one. One of the bomb disposal experts couldn't stand it anymore and spoke up to stop Yun Jian. We've already confirmed that this yellow wire is definitely not the correct one. This bomb disposal expert explained to Yun Jian with what he thought was a very unique opinion. Then he continued to speak. After all, you're not a real bomb disposal expert. We've defused bombs for so many years, so naturally we have more experience than you. So, of course, you have to listen to our opinions. This bomb disposal expert didn't finish speaking. Yun Jian smiled and looked at him. Is that so? The next second she moved the scissors and the scissors happened to be on the yellow wire. The moment she cut it, the yellow wire broke. You want to get us killed? The face of the bomb disposal expert who had lectured Yun Jian instantly darkened. Everyone's expression was filled with fear. According to the bomb disposal expert, Yun Jian had cut it wrongly? Chapter 292. Oh my God. We're done for. The moment the bomb countdown timer sounded, some of the people present had already covered their heads and laid on the ground. Everyone was cursing Yun Jian. She was just a little kid, what was she doing here? Everyone here was going to be buried here because of her. At this time, other than Yun Jian, who was standing still with her arms crossed, everyone around her, including the experts, was lying on the ground trying to minimize the damage. The last 10 seconds of the countdown timer ended. The people lying on the ground with their hands on their heads remained in this position for a full 10 seconds. At this time, the group of people who were lying on the ground miserably thought that the bomb was going to explode suddenly heard the girl's melodious voice. Lying on the ground, is it fun? Everyone's nerves twitched violently. Nothing happened? They didn't die? The bomb didn't explode? This meant that the time bomb had really been defused. The group of people who stood up in a daze were instantly dumbfounded. Everyone couldn't help but gasp in their hearts. She had cut the yellow wire correctly. This also meant that if Yun Jian hadn't appeared just now, all of them would have been buried here because of the expert's dictatorial decision. When everyone came to their senses, they took a deep breath and came back to their senses with lingering fear. Only then did they feel embarrassed. Especially the expert who had lectured Yun Jian just now, his old face was flushed red. Little girl, thank you so much just now. If it weren't for you, we would have. A special police officer who had been contemptuous of Yun Jian just now stood up. He wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and apologized to Yun Jian. Before he could finish his sentence, Yun Jian interrupted him. No need. With that, Yun Jian frowned slightly and walked out. The people present wanted to say something, but when they thought of their actions just now, they didn't have the face to say anything. Everyone's faces were red as they watched Yun Jian leave with extremely embarrassed eyes. After Yun Jian ran out of the factory, her eyes narrowed fiercely. She raised her eyebrows slightly and ran in a direction. The person who set up the Kosha mercenaries' exclusive AK-4 time bomb must not have gone far. The message she received from Gu Junjian confirmed this point. Now, Gu Junjian was leading the army special forces to surround the person who set the time bomb. They were currently in the direction Yun Jian ran in. She ran in the direction she had judged. After running for about 3 to 4 kilometers, she soon saw a group of fully armed special forces soldiers surrounding a residential house in 4 directions. A group of neighbors who were watching the show stood around, but these ordinary people who were far away from the scene. These sarcastic people were afraid, but they couldn't help but be curious as they stood there looking at the scene. Yun Jian heard a lot of gossips when she passed by. Hey, did you guys know that a family in the residential building in front of us has been taken hostage by a bad guy? Did you see that? Even the special forces soldiers. That's why they surrounded the residential building. I heard that the person is very powerful. He even set up a time bomb not far from here on Huda Road. But now that the bomb disposal experts have gone over, the bomb must have been defused. Someone seemed to have seen the whole process with his own eyes as he bragged exaggeratedly. It was as if he was a witness to everything. Are you serious? Something like this can happen here? What should the family who was held hostage do? Someone shouted in panic. Chapter 293. It wasn't just the gossipy women in the village who liked to gossip when they got together. Even the rich women in the city could gossip when they got together. When Yun Jian walked past the 2 women, she couldn't help but sneer in her heart. Then, she walked towards the residential building that was surrounded by people. Because the people watching the show were standing far away, Yun Jian became very conspicuous when she walked away from them and walked towards the empty area where no one dared to go. Look, that little girl is actually going that way. Didn't you see the special forces lying in ambush all around? There are still bad people in that residential building. This little girl is too daring. The woman who was the most talkative couldn't help but brag in front of the crowd. Because of this woman's brag, the crowd became restless again. But no one stood out to stop Yun Jian and said, "Little girl, it's dangerous, come back quickly. Little girl, it's too dangerous here. Go back quickly." A special forces soldier from far away saw Yun Jian running over and thought that she didn't know the situation there. He waved at Yun Jian enthusiastically and stopped her from going any further. Yun Jian was already close to the residential building. Oh my God, this little girl doesn't know what's good for her. The special forces told her not to go over, but she still went over. If she doesn't believe the police, she won't even know how she died later. The woman from earlier started to evaluate from an outsider's point of view. That's right, that's right. The group of people around them echoed. That woman hid in the crowd. She suddenly felt like an omniscient god who could explain everything to the people around her who were too stupid to understand the situation. Let her pass. At this moment, a special forces soldier ran over like a gust of wind. This special forces soldier was the one who apologized to Yun Jian in the factory not long ago. When he saw Yun Jian leave, he felt that he had to apologize. After all, she saved all of their lives, so he chased after her. But who knew that Yun Jian would run so fast? He almost ran out of breath. Only then did he catch up with her. I'm Zhang Weigua, a member of the Flying Tiger Special Police Force. The time bomb has been successfully removed, and it was this young lady who removed it. So let her go. Special Forces Zhang Weigua shouted at the Special Forces soldiers as he ran. Zhang Weigua's words were meant to help Yun Jian and help her get past the Special Forces. However, what he didn't know was that his words made everyone present dumbfounded. What the hell? The bomb was actually defused by this little girl? What about the bomb disposal experts? A young girl deactivated the time bomb. Is this realistic? Not to mention the ordinary people, even the special forces were completely dumbfounded. Yun Jian was already standing in front of the residential building. She didn't seem to care about the shocked gazes around her. Instead, she stood in front of the special forces soldier who had kindly stopped her and asked him, "Do you have the grappling hook?" After knowing that Yun Jian was the one who removed the bomb, the special forces soldier was dumbfounded. He didn't react to Yun Jian's question at all and just replied in confusion, "Yes." As he spoke, he took it out from his backpack. Yun Jian took the grappling hook and nimbly walked towards the residential building. Everyone knew that the family that was held hostage was on the 6th floor. Looking at Yun Jian's actions, was she going to use the grappling hook to climb up? Could she climb up? That was the 6th floor. Without any safety measures, how could she climb up with just a grappling hook? Chapter 294. While everyone was still in shock, they saw Yun Jian fling her flying claws and leaping onto the wall. Then she used the power of the flying claws to hook onto the floor. Her petite and agile figure followed closely and hung in the air. It was as if she had a pair of eyes under her feet. She stepped on the uneven spots of the residential building agilely. After a while, everyone only saw a flash before their eyes. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Yun Jian had already climbed onto the wall of the residential building and arrived at the window on the 6th floor. The sight of Yun Jian standing by the window without any protection sent shivers down the spines of idlers who were standing afar. What would he do if he accidentally fell? As for the special forces below, they were glaring at Yun Jian who was above them. God knows how many ways they had thought of sneaking into the residential building to rescue the hostage. It wasn't that no one had thought of using the flying claws to climb up to the 6th floor from the 1st floor. But no one dared to do it. Because no matter how good their physical fitness was, no one could climb up to the 6th floor using only the flying claws. Unless they had more weapons and equipment. The special forces that had sneaked in by other means had yet to return. This result implied that the special forces that had sneaked up were most likely caught by the enemy. At this moment, Yun Jian had already flipped over and snuck into the window on the 6th floor that she had opened. She went up, she really went up. That young lady really snuck in. The crowd exclaimed. At this moment, the special forces surrounding the residential building began to move. After Yun Jian had snuck into the window on the 6th floor, a team of special forces ran up the stairs quietly all the way to the 6th floor. At this moment, Yun Jian, who had flipped over the window on the 6th floor, reassessed her surroundings. She saw a bed with a huge wedding photo hanging at the head of the bed. It must be the head of the household. It was obvious that this was the bedroom. The person who had kidnapped this family and planted the kosher mercenaries' unique AK-4 time bomb in the factory was in the living room outside the bedroom. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. Her footsteps were light and graceful, and she did not make a single sound. She came to the door of the bedroom, held the doorknob with her right hand and flipped her left hand. She was ready to use a knife in case of an emergency. Yun Jian opened the door without making a sound. As soon as she opened the door, she took 2 steps forward. The sound of Yun Jian opening the door startled the criminals and hostages in the living room. Yun Jian seemed to have found the right position. The blade in her hand flew out at the same time. TSK TSK TSK. The sound of the blade piercing into the skin was bone-chilling. Before Yun Jian could see the appearance of the criminal, she had already found his position and launched the flying knife. And that criminal's skills were not weak either. The criminal rolled away at lightning speed, dodging Yun Jian's flying daggers, but he still suffered some injuries. It was only then that Yun Jian realized the situation. The criminal was also sizing up the little girl who could sneak in without him noticing. Yun Jian realized that there were a few hostages tied up by the criminal. A man and a woman should be the owners of this unit, while a few men dressed like special forces were tied up beside them. Their mouths were covered with black tape. There was no doubt that the men dressed as special forces were sent by the underlings to investigate the situation. In the end, they did not expect to be caught by the criminals and tied up as well. What surprised Yun Jian was not this, but the fact that the criminal was a member of the kosher mercenaries. He was even a higher up in the mercenary group. In spite of it, this person was Yun Jian's enemy. This person's code name was Hound, the subordinate of the previous boss of the kosher mercenaries. He currently occupied a position in the kosher mercenaries. There must be a reason why this person would come to Longmen City. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes, her gaze dimming. Then she narrowed her eyes again, a glint flashing across her eyes. No matter what the reason was, he had set off kosher mercenaries' unique bombs outside and almost caused a riot. He had violated the kosher mercenaries' rule, No one was allowed to cause trouble in the name of kosher mercenaries. It was obvious that Hound had violated this rule. Therefore Yunjian was going to clean house today. Chapter 295. Jia. Hound, who had been grazed by Yunjian's flying dagger, squinted his eyes at Yunjian. At the same time he let out a sinister laugh. Just this laugh alone was enough to make one's hair stand on end. Among everyone present, other than Yunjian, the tied-up man and woman, as well as the Special Forces soldiers who had infiltrated and were caught, had their mouths covered with black tape. Hound was considered the second in command of the kosher mercenaries. For him to be able to sit in the upper echelon of the kosher mercenaries, his identity and status were naturally not weak. Yunjian's red lips curled up as she looked at Hound. The two of them looked at each other, neither making the first move. Yunjian did not make the first move because she knew that Hound was not weak. If she still had her physique from her previous life, she would naturally be able to defeat Hound in seconds. However, it was unrealistic for her to kill Hound in seconds now. Although Hound was not ranked on the international assassin ranking, compared to Wolf Blade, who had been killed by Yunjian in seconds, Hound was many times more powerful than Wolf Blade. Just as Yunjian and Hound were looking at each other to see through each other's abilities, the Special Forces soldiers who were tied up on the ground and had their mouths covered with black tape widened their eyes. When they had infiltrated this place they had fought with Hound. Naturally they knew how terrifying Hound's abilities were. However, just now when Yunjian had infiltrated the place, the flying dagger she had thrown could graze Hound. This meant that this little girl's abilities were definitely not ordinary. Even when compared to the sturdy Hound in front of him, he was not inferior at all. Of course, these Special Forces soldiers did not know that if Yunjian recovered her physique from her previous life, Hound's skills would be like trash. He would be killed in seconds. Before a battle between experts, it was a test of mental fortitude. Yunjian's mental fortitude had always been very good. She stood on the spot and looked at Hound as if she was ready to fight at any time. She slightly curled the corners of her lips and maintained this posture. In the end, it was the Hound who couldn't help but speak first. He smiled sinisterly, and the scar on his face was very frightening. "You're not with the police," Hound said with certainty. At the same time he looked at Yunjian with an evil grin. After that, Hound paused for a moment, then laughed arrogantly. The capabilities of this group of Special Forces are simply too weak. This was mockery and contempt. As soon as Hound finished speaking, the Special Forces soldiers who were tied up on the ground and had their mouths covered started making muffled sounds. However, this was only enough to make them roll on the ground a few times. Hound's words were meant to distract Yunjian. If Yunjian was an ordinary person, she would have already fallen into the trap. Unfortunately, she wasn't. Ha! Yunjian's lips curled into a smile. However, just as Yunjian finished sneering, the door of this unit was pushed in from the outside. Then, a large group of Special Forces soldiers who were waiting downstairs rushed in. Even the Special Forces soldier who kindly told Yunjian not to come over was among this group of people. They obviously saw that the time was ripe, so they rushed in to capture the hostage. Tsk tisk. The group of people quickly surrounded Hound. However, Hound was not afraid at all. He then sneered at the Special Forces soldiers and said bluntly, "You Special Forces soldiers from Country Z are just SOSO. Haha, in the end you still have to rely on a little girl to rush in here." Such provocative words infuriated the group of Special Forces soldiers even more. F***ck your mother. Someone from the Special Forces immediately cursed at Hound in a low voice. Yunjian lowered her eyes. She raised her head slightly. That half-smile on her small face revealed a hint of viciousness. She looked at Hound and said directly, "Using the name of kosher mercenaries to cause trouble everywhere. Hound, don't you know the rules of the organization?" Just as Hound gained the upper hand, Yunjian's sudden voice made everyone's eyelids twitch. Chapter 296. This little girl actually knew his code name. And she even knew the rules of the kosher mercenaries. Hound was stunned for a moment. As for the other Special Forces soldiers, they were all stunned. They were stunned, but not because of what Yunjian said. It was because what Yunjian said just now was not in Chinese. She spoke to Hound in Hindi. This group of Special Forces soldiers did not understand Hindi, but they were stunned because Yunjian, a young girl, actually knew how to speak another country's language. And judging from her accent, she seemed to be speaking Hindi. After Hound recovered from his shock, he suddenly put away his ferocious expression and his face became serious. He looked at Yunjian with a murderous look in his eyes. He asked again, "Who are you?" You don't deserve to know who I am. Yun Jian replied in Chinese this time, and her arrogant words shocked Hound and the other Special Forces soldiers again. Although Hound was a high-ranking member of the Kosha mercenaries, his position was not the highest. He could occupy a position in the Kosha mercenaries, but he could not become the eagle of the generation. At least, even if Yun Jian killed him today, the Kosha mercenaries would not be affected at all. Damn it. Hound was not a person who acted rashly, but he was a person who could not stand provocation. This could be seen from the fact that he could not hold back and spoke first when he met Yun Jian's eyes just now. Yun Jian's arrogant words just now infuriated Hound even more. Yun Jian's expression did not change at all, but no one noticed that her lips were slightly curled. Hound's weakness was that he looked down on the weak. Moreover, he could not keep his cool and was easily provoked into anger. As expected, Yun Jian's words to Hound in Hindi had already made Hound restless. Hound kept guessing Yun Jian's identity in his heart. However, the contemptuous words just now had completely ignited Hound's anger. I don't deserve to know? You're courting death. Hound let out a low growl. After saying that, he raised his hand and clenched his fist. His fist was tight, and his huge and powerful fist made people tremble in fear. He clenched his fist and swung it at Yun Jian. Be careful. Seeing this, the group of Special Forces soldiers couldn't help but gasp and shout at Yun Jian. Yun Jian, on the other hand, stood upright in the same spot. Her long hair fluttered in the windless room due to the force of Hound's punch. Under the watchful eyes of the owners of the house, the man and woman, as well as all the Special Forces soldiers, Yun Jian spread out her arms. She leaned back and bent down to dodge Hound's punch from the side. Yun Jian's dodging was already dazzling to the eyes. Her speed was beyond compare. However, this was not the reason why he was shocked. Yun Jian exerted force on her feet and her petite body flipped to the left. She had already retreated behind Hound. Hound didn't expect Yun Jian to be so agile. He frowned and the irritation in his heart intensified. If he didn't kill this little girl who spouted nonsense and even said, "You don't deserve to know who I am," he would write his name in reverse. Anger and fury intertwined in Hound's heart. It was just that the difference between fast and slow was only an instant. In the next second, Yun Jian's arm was like a coiling snake's body. She curled around Hound's arm. Then a scene unfolded before everyone's eyes. They saw Yun Jian grab Hound's arm. She suddenly used a lot of strength and directly pulled Hound's arm. She lifted Hound up and threw him to the ground with his back facing up. This move was so fast that no one could see it clearly. Hound didn't even have time to turn around. However, they saw Yun Jian on the other side reach out her fair hands and grab Hound's spine before he landed on the ground. Crack. A crisp and horrifying sound was heard. With a bang, the Hound fell to the ground, no longer making a sound. Twisting the spine that supported a person's body would cause a person to die instantly. And this method was the usual method used by the assassins and female secret agents in the movie. Chapter 297. Murder. Yun Jian had killed Hound. The man and woman, who were the owners of the house, fainted on the spot when they saw this scene. They had not fainted when they were kidnapped by Hound, but now they had fainted. Compared to the man and woman, the group of Special Forces soldiers had at least been exposed to this kind of thing before. In spite of it, Yun Jian, a young girl, had killed Hound in front of everyone. This was beyond their expectations. Firstly, it was because of her skills. Secondly, she did not show the slightest bit of fear after killing someone. Was she really as simple as her appearance made her out to be? At this moment, Yun Jian had already walked towards the group of stunned Special Forces soldiers. She stood in front of them with Hound's corpse behind her. She did not show the slightest bit of fear after killing someone. Instead, she looked at the group of Special Forces soldiers and said, "Let me introduce myself. I'm Yun Jian, codenamed Killer God. I'm a new Special Forces soldier under Gu Junjian." There was no need to hide these things. This group of Special Forces soldiers in front of her were all from the regular army. At the same time, they were on Gu Junjian's side. Yun Jian, Chu Ning, and the rest were the new talents of the younger generation that Gu Junjian had discovered. Hence, they were selected to join the Special Forces training camp as candidates. The successful completion of the previous mission also made Yun Jian and the rest official Special Forces soldiers. However, as of now, they were not from the regular army. This group of Special Forces soldiers in front of her had undergone even more brutal training. They were talents who had been carefully selected. They were members of the Special Forces like Gu Junjian. Actually, there was not much difference. In short, Yun Jian and the rest were new recruits, while this group of Special Forces soldiers in front of her were veterans. After Yun Jian finished her self-introduction, the group of Special Forces soldiers in front of her were obviously stunned. Naturally, they did not expect Yun Jian to be a member of the Special Forces. Not long after, someone immediately shouted, "You're the girl under Gu Junjian, codenamed Killer God." A tall and lean Special Forces soldier pointed at Yun Jian and exclaimed. This tall and lean Special Forces soldier was called Zhou Datu. When Zhou Datu exclaimed, everyone's gaze turned to Yun Jian. "You know me?" Yun Jian raised her eyebrows and asked. Under the watchful eyes of the Special Forces, Zhou Datu looked at Yun Jian excitedly and said, "That's right. Yes. Last time, the mission sent by the higher-ups was very difficult. Even the experienced veteran Special Forces soldiers couldn't complete it. In the end, this mission was taken over by Officer Gu. I heard that in the end it was led by a young lady with the codename Killing God. She completed the mission in just half a day." "That little girl is you, right?" Zhou Datu looked at Yun Jian excitedly, waiting for her reply. Of course, all of the Special Forces soldiers present heard of course. It was said that the mission was accepted by a group of new recruits, and they completed it successfully in the end. However, they didn't know who the new candidates were. According to Zhou Datu, the previous mission with such difficulty was actually completed by this Yun Jian in front of them. Everyone could not help but be shocked by this. However, looking at the scene, Yun Jian alone killed Hound that so many of them could not handle. Just based on this point alone. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.